Move down to the basement. I'm sleeping in the master bedroom tonight." My son said it like it was nothing, curt voice, eyes sliding over me as if I were a stranger hired to clean. I stood still in the living room where the ivory tablecloth my mother left me lay perfectly smooth and the good china caught the early sun. He had just returned after 24 hours missing one day after knocking me to the kitchen floor. Now he walked in, breathed in the smell of the bread I'd baked, and smiled like a winner sure his fists had made me obedient. I only answered softly, "All right, son." Then I turned away, hiding my trembling hands as I set them on the drawer by the door. Inside was the paper I'd prepared for months, a temporary protective order, effective this morning. He thought today's table was set to welcome him home. In truth, I was celebrating the day he left my life for good. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Clara Hensley, 69, widowed, living alone in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, where winter comes early and loneliness often lingers longer than the snow. I once thought my old age would be peaceful, reading, gardening, calling to check on my grandkids. But 7 years ago, my life opened its door to a storm. One October afternoon, Caleb, my son, showed up at the door with 2 worn suitcases and tired eyes. "Just a few weeks, Mom," he said, voice shaky like he might cry. I looked at his face, the boy I'd carried through so many blizzards, and asked nothing else. I opened the door and my heart. The house was too big for a widow, too silent since my husband George died of heart disease. I thought with my son here, at least the house would feel warm again. But weeks passed, then months. Caleb didn't go anywhere. He slept till noon, watched TV in the afternoon, and drank beer in the living room at night. I told myself, he's just worn out, he needs time. I cooked, did laundry, cleaned. Every time I started to bring up job, hunting, I'd see his shoulders droop and hear, "Don't start that now, Mom." One evening, when I cooked chicken instead of steak, Caleb exploded. "God, can you do anything right?" he shouted, and hurled the plate at the wall. Porcelain shattered across the kitchen floor, and a shard cut deep into my hand. I dropped to my knees to clean up, shaking and apologizing. I even promised to make something else just to keep the peace. While rinsing the cut, I told myself, he's stressed. It's my fault. I should have asked what he wanted. That was the first moment I blamed myself, and the moment hell opened its door. After that, the yelling became the house's background noise. Caleb yelled because breakfast was cold, the coffee too sweet, the tablecloth wrinkled. He said I walked too loud, that I even breathed wrong. I started tiptoeing, closing doors without a sound. Singing in the kitchen? Not anymore. I used to love cooking so much I'd hum Frank Sinatra while stirring sauce, but now I held my breath to stay safe. Every morning I got up at 5 a.m., made coffee exactly how he liked it, extra strong, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it had to be in his father's gray mug. I cooked 3 different dinner options in case he didn't like one, and still, it was never enough. The yelling turned into touching. First a shoulder shove in the hallway, then a hard grip on my arm when I passed the salt, then the time he twisted my wrist out of joint because I didn't pour coffee fast enough. "Your fault. You're clumsy," he said, not even looking at me. And I foolish nodded. Because if I didn't believe that lie, I had to face something worse. My son, the one I'd raised with all my love and sacrifice, was becoming my abuser. Friends became memories. Nora Blake, my best friend for 30 years, still called weekly and asked me out for coffee, but I had to decline every time because Caleb would, conveniently, need me home. He'd say, "I'm tired, stay and make dinner," or just give me that cold look that told me leaving the house was a sin. After the 10th no, Nora stopped calling. My world shrank to 4 walls. A house with windows but no light. Mrs. Ellison, the neighbor across the street, once asked softly, "Clara, what happened to your arm?" I tugged my sleeve down and forced a smile. "I fell in the garden." Her eyes looked so sad, the look of someone who knows the truth but can't step in. I felt ashamed, not because of the bruise, but because of my own cowardice. Still, I lived like that for 7 years. 7 years enduring, 7 years persuading myself he was just going through a hard time, that a mother shouldn't abandon her child when he's weak. 7 years cooking in fear, sleeping in unease, and existing instead of living. The last slap, the one that knocked me down yesterday, wasn't the most painful, but it woke me up. That day, I'd made a pot of vegetable soup because the money was nearly gone. There was not even $300 left in the account. When Caleb saw the soup, he sneered, "Soup? You want me to starve?" I tried to explain we had to save, that the pension wouldn't come till the end of the month, that we could look for ways to cut costs together. But before I finished, he slapped me. I toppled out of the chair, hit the floor hard, felt my teeth clack. Blood spread salty in my mouth. I heard him say something like, "Clean this mess up, you useless thing." Then the TV clicked on and canned sitcom laughter filled the house. I lay there, back against the cold tile, staring up at the cracked ceiling, and realized I could die here under the hands of the son I gave birth to. No, I could not let that happen. Last night I lay awake till morning, plotting how to get out. I didn't have the strength to fight back, but I had what he didn't, a plan and patience. Today, when Caleb walked in with that smug, "Move to the basement," he didn't know every detail around him. The tablecloth, the pitcher of lemon water, the loaf of bread was part of my final goodbye script. The dining table looked beautiful in the early light, white and solemn. It was the table I once used to teach Caleb how to slice breakfast fruit, to host his 10th birthday party, to listen to my husband read poems when he was alive. Now that table would witness a beginning. I watched Caleb pour water, his eyes bright with that familiar self-satisfaction. "See, Mom? Everything's easier when you listen." I smiled, lips trembling but eyes steady. "You're right. He didn't know that in a few hours a police officer would knock on my door, say his name, and order him to leave by law. For 7 years I lived in fear. But this morning, I chose to live in freedom. And that's how it began, with a sentence that sounded ordinary but was the bell that ended my captivity in my own home. His name is Caleb, and he didn't know this morning. The table I set wasn't to welcome him. It was to send him off forever. After that morning, everything fell into a cold rhythm where I could barely recognize myself. Caleb started controlling everything money first. One day he stood in the kitchen holding the envelope with my pension I had just received. "Just let me hold it for convenience. You forget things, and people can take advantage of you. I'll manage it so you don't have to worry." His tone was gentle, but his eyes left no room for argument. I remember how it felt, my hand still gripping the envelope, my thumb pressed tight like keeping that paper meant keeping part of my life. Then I let go, like I always did. "Okay, you keep it." From that day, I slowly had to ask permission to live. "Want to buy medication?" Ask. "Want to go to the market?" Wait for him to check the balance. He'd say, "You're a big spender, always buying useless stuff." Useless, to him, was the tea I drank, a gardening magazine, or a pair of dishwashing gloves. He kept my bank card. I had only a few singles in my pocket, enough for bread or a little milk. Every dollar I had to ask for, with a forced smile. Over time, I stopped asking. I learned to read his mood to know when I could bring up medicine money and when I should stay quiet. Every morning, I got up at 5 a.m. I brewed coffee extra strong with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it always had to be in the gray mug with Dad's mug on it, the one my husband used. If I poured it into the wrong cup, he'd give me that knife-cold look. "Don't you respect my father?" My feet learned how to make no sound. I drifted through rooms barefoot, the floor cold under my skin. Even my breathing got cautious. I cooked 3 different dishes for dinner just in case. He didn't like one, but no matter what I did, his line landed like a curse. Never enough. I used to play music while I cooked. Elvis, Patsy Cline, Frank Sinatra, the songs George and I slow danced to in the living room. Now, if I so much as hummed, he'd growl, "Your voice annoys me." So, I went quiet. The home that once was a nest turned into a steel cage. Everything had rules I had to memorize. Don't turn on the TV when he's on his phone. Don't tidy the living room when he's sleeping. Don't stay on the phone too long. Don't let the water run too hard when washing dishes. I lived in fear of collisions, literal and figurative. His long silences scared me more than his outbursts, because I knew the storm was just paused. Then the smallest thing would set it off. That Thursday night was cold and damp. I made vegetable soup because the fridge held only carrots, celery, and a few potatoes. There was not even $300 left in the account. I was stretching it to month's end. I set the bowl in front of him and said gently, "Try it, there's some chicken in there today." Caleb looked at the bowl, then at me, face twisted like I'd insulted him. "Soup again?" His voice dropped, and I knew what was coming. "You serving me garbage?" I kept my voice steady. "It's just for now. By the end of the week I'll—" Before I could finish, he flipped the bowl. Hot liquid splashed my hand, burning. Soup poured across the table, onto the floor, spreading like a pale stain. Then the slap. Fast, hard, so sudden all I saw was the kitchen light spinning. The chair crashed, I hit the tile. My knee slammed, shoulder burned, and a stabbing pain in my side made it hard to breathe. I heard his voice, distant but clear. "Get up, clean this mess, useless." And then the TV. American sitcom laughter filled the house like nothing had happened. I lay there for minutes or hours, I don't know, shaking, breathing short, heart racing. Blood at my lip, soup in my hair, wind at the window. No one else on earth knew what had just happened. Just me, him, and the walls. When I stood, my back felt split in two. I picked up a rag and slowly wiped every puddle. Each bend sent a knife through my side. I didn't dare cry. I was afraid the sound would bring him back. When it was clean like it never happened, I stood at the window. My reflection was a blur, gray hair in tangles, sunken eyes, a face bruised and swollen. Streetlight glow made my skin look like wax. I touched the glass and whispered, "Who are you, Clara?" The woman in the glass didn't answer. That night I didn't eat. I sat by the bed, holding a cold teacup, listening to the clock tick. Each beat was a warning. Part of me wanted to run, but another part was tied down by fear and mother love. Even beaten and humiliated, my heart hurt thinking of the boy who once fit in my arms. I remembered him at 8, when bullies picked on him at school. I'd stood on that playground and shouted, "Don't touch my son!" I had promised I'd always protect him, and now I was the one who needed protection from him. Around 3 a.m., I heard the door open. Caleb came back from drinking. The hall filled with beer, cigarettes, and sweat. I held my breath and listened to the heavy steps. His door slammed. Silence. I stared into the dark, and for the first time in years, a thought came cold and clear. If I stay, I'll die. Maybe not today, but soon. Not a gentle death in my sleep, but a quiet one on the kitchen floor in a house full of TV laughter, where no one knows and no one finds me in time. I looked at the little room and the old photos, our wedding, Caleb's birthdays, the beach trip years ago. I saw another woman in them, blonde hair, bright smile, eyes full of light. She'd been gone a long time. I realized I was no longer afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying without living again first. That night, I didn't pray the usual prayer. I didn't ask God for endurance. I asked for courage to stop enduring, and in the heavy silence of that, I made a decision. There will be no next time, no more yelling, No more hits. I wouldn't scream or seek revenge. I'd do what he would never expect. I would get out of this cage and take myself back. No savior, no miracle. Just the belief that I deserve to live. I looked out the window where moonlight caught the raindrops from the afternoon. They glittered like 100 small eyes watching me as if the world were witnessing my quiet vow. Tomorrow, I whispered, everything changes. For the first time in 7 years, I smiled not from joy, but because I knew the fear inside me had started to crack. After a sleepless night, when the first thin light slipped through the curtain, I got up with a body so sore I had to hold the wall to stand. Every movement stabbed my ribs like a small knife, but I walked to the low dresser, the place where, for years, I kept what little freedom I had left. It's an old, dark wood dresser with a third drawer only I knew how to press her. Lock. I opened it with the tiny key hidden in the pin jar. Inside was my worn expense ledger, pages yellowed at the corners. Between lines of careful numbers, groceries, utilities, medicine lay a small brown envelope. I had tucked it there long ago, stashing a few dollars whenever Caleb didn't notice. Counting it now came to $320, not much, but all the freedom I had left. I sat and smoothed each bill. They smelled faintly damp, like my fear, locked away too long from the light. Beneath the envelope lay a small business card with frayed edges. Marilyn Ortega, social worker, Franklin County Senior Assistance. At the top corner was Mrs. Ellison's handwriting, the neighbor across the street. If anything happens, call her. Don't endure alone. I remember the day she gave it to me. It was spring. I was clipping roses when she came to the fence and said quietly, "Clara, are you okay? I heard a loud noise the other day." I smiled and lied. "It's nothing." I dropped a pan. She stared a long time, unconvinced. Before she left, she pressed the card into my hand. "Just in case," she said. I kept it for years, never daring to use it until today. I slipped the envelope of cash into the inside pocket of my coat and tucked Marilyn's card against my chest, where I could feel it with my hand, a small reminder I still had a chance. When I looked up, the mirror showed a face that no longer looked like mine. My right eye was swollen purple, my lips split, bruises spreading toward my ear. Part of me wanted to walk out the door right then, but I knew if I went out looking like that, someone would ask, and Caleb would find out. I needed time, days, for the swelling to fade, for him to believe I'd learned my lesson. In the days that followed, I became the good mother he always wanted. I bowed my head, said yes, didn't argue, didn't meet his eyes. I served meals on time, brewed coffee to spec, cleaned without a sound. When he passed by, I stepped back. I let him see a woman completely subdued. Caleb started to look satisfied. He'd pass me in the living room with a smug nod. "See? Not so hard," he said, smirking. "You just need to know who's in charge." I smiled, empty and hollow, but enough to keep him fooled. Inside, I counted days and hours. I'd waited too long not to be quiet now. "Sunday night," he said. "Tomorrow I'm meeting friends. I'll be back in the afternoon. Have dinner at 8. Make steak. I want a proper meal." I nodded. "All right, son." In my head, "Good. Go. As far as you can." Monday morning was gray. Cold wind pressed at the kitchen window. I heard the lock turn, then the front door close. Caleb's pickup rolled off the drive. I stood still for a few seconds, making sure he was truly gone. The house was empty, just the clock on the wall ticking. My hands shook as I lifted the phone. My fingers were so numb, I misdialed twice. On the third try, it rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then a warm, steady woman's voice. "Franklin County Senior Assistance. This is Marilyn Ortega. How can I help you?" I choked. For a moment it felt like a rope cinched around my throat. No sound came out. I only heard my own ragged breathing and my heart hammering. "I'm sorry. I stammered. My name is Clara Hensley. I need help. She paused on the other end, then her voice softened, like speaking to a frightened child. I'm here, Clara. It's okay. Take your time. Are you safe right now? That question made me cry. I couldn't answer at first, only heard my own small, shaky sobs in the receiver. At last I whispered, No, but I want to be. All right, she said. Can you come to my office today? Or I can come to you if needed. I checked the clock. It was 10:30 a.m. Caleb wouldn't return before 6 p.m. I had nearly 8 hours. I can come, I said, still shaky. I know. Where it is. Good. Meet me at 41 Arlington Street, 2nd floor, room 204. Do you want me to have an officer escort you? No, I rushed. I just need to get there. She was quiet a moment, then gentle. I understand. Bring ID if you can. And Clara, you just did something very brave. I hung up and sat still for a long time. A strange feeling rose, neither relief nor fear. It was like standing at the edge of a very high cliff, knowing one more step means there's no going back. I changed into my plainest clothes, brown slacks, gray sweater, a scarf to cover the bruises. I checked the mirror, less swollen, but the faint purple still there. A little powder to blur it, a touch of lipstick to look less washed out. Each motion made me feel like a criminal pretending to be ordinary. Before leaving, I grabbed my keys, the cash, and Marilyn's address on a slip of paper. I glanced back at the dining table where the ivory cloth lay smooth. Yesterday, I'd washed and ironed it like I was preparing a farewell only I knew about. My hand paused on the doorknob. The whole house seemed to hold its breath with me. In my head, Caleb's voice, "Don't you ever leave without telling me." I tightened my grip. "No one tells me that anymore," I whispered. The door opened and the morning cold hit my face. Freedom smells different, like wind, wet leaves. Life outside I'd forgotten. I stepped out and pulled the door gently closed without locking it. I wanted police to be able to enter easily if needed when I came back. The street was quiet. Sparrows lifted off the fence. I pulled my coat tight and hurried toward downtown. Each step matched a hard heartbeat. Every sound behind me made me flinch. But no one called my name. No familiar engine. Only when I saw the sign Arlington Building 41 did I breathe out. My hand shook so badly I had to grab the rail on the steps. A bell chimed when I opened the office door, warm, light. A few green plants on the desk. A beige upholstered chair. A woman in her 50s with neatly tied brown hair stood and smiled. "Are you Clara?" I just nodded. "Welcome. I'm Marilyn." Her voice was low, clear, carrying a calm I'd forgotten people could have. She handed me a glass of water and offered a seat. I sat, hands still clamped on my bag. Marilyn looked at me without pity and asked softly, "Would you like to tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth and the first words came out shaky like a child learning to speak. "I've lived with my son 7 years, and I think, if I don't do something, he'll kill me." She didn't interrupt, didn't press. She just nodded, brown eyes deep like they were holding every word. I told her about the shouting, the slaps, walking barefoot in my own home. About fear, about forgetting who I was. Each sentence felt like shedding a layer of chain. When I finished, Marilyn said just one line, "You're not crazy. And you're not alone, Clara. From here on, we'll find the way out together." That simple sentence was the first spark I'd felt in my heart in years of darkness. And I knew if I had any strength left, I would follow that spark all the way. Marilyn's office wasn't big, but as soon as I stepped in, my chest eased. Soft light filtered through the window onto the light wood desk and touched the green leaves in small pots. The smell of fresh coffee and a hint of orange bergamot oil made the room warm and safe, a scent I hadn't known in years. Marilyn sat across from me with a small notebook. Her voice was steady but firm. "Clara, remember this. Sons don't have the right to hit their mothers. No one has that right." I lowered my head, tears falling onto my hands. Simple words, but like a key opening the invisible shackle I'd worn for 7 years. All that time I believed I deserved it, that if I were better, quieter, Caleb would stop being angry. Now a stranger told me what I'd forgotten. Violence is never love. Marilyn poured coffee and said gently, "Start from the beginning. Slowly. I'll document everything." I told it all morning. Coffee, fear-filled dinners, punches and insults. Whenever I stopped choking up, she just nodded. Between us, there was no pity, only listening and trust. When I finished, Marilyn set the notebook down and said quietly, "Now we need to do something important. I have to photograph your injuries as evidence." She took out a camera, asked permission, and began to take pictures. The bruise on my cheek, the purple marks on my wrist, the small split on my lip. The shutter clicked, and strangely, instead of shame, I felt relief, as if my pain was finally being seen. She made a few more notes, then pulled a business card from a drawer. "I want you to meet someone. He's an attorney who handles domestic violence cases. His name is Graham Porter. He works with our center and offers free help in urgent situations like yours." I looked at the card and felt that old fear rise. I'm not sure. I don't want to make it a big deal. If Caleb finds out, he'll lose it. Marilyn took my hand, warm and steady. "I understand your fear, Clara. But right now, you need a team to protect you. Not for revenge, but for survival." She paused, meeting my eyes. "If you do nothing, he will continue. And next time, you might not be here to tell me this story." A chill ran through me. I was quiet a long time, then nodded. "Okay, I'll meet him." That afternoon, Marilyn took me to attorney Graham Porter's office just a few blocks away. His practice was in an old building with a glass door and a sign that read, "Legal Aid for Survivors of Abuse." Not fancy, not flashy, but I could feel the professionalism in every detail, from the perfectly aligned bookshelves to the framed law degree on the wall. Graham was around 60, with lightly graying hair and round frames. He stood to shake my hand, firm but not forceful. "Marilyn has filled me in," he began, calm and steady. "You've endured far too long, Clara. Now it's time we take back control." I sat down, heart pounding. He opened a file, laid out the papers, and spoke slowly so I could follow each step. "We'll file for a temporary protective order. This is a legal document that bars Caleb from coming near you or contacting you in any way. If he violates it, the police can arrest him immediately." I clenched my hands. "What if he snaps? What if he shows up before the police get there?" Graham nodded. "That's a fair question. So we won't take risks. Everything will be planned. In the next 48 hours, we will. Tomorrow morning, you'll go to the bank with me to restore your accounts and block his secondary card. After that, we'll file the protective order with the court. Finally, the police will accompany us to serve the order. At that point, Caleb will be required to leave." He paused, his eyes softening. "You won't have to be afraid anymore, Clara. But we'll take it one step at a time, all right?" I looked at my hands trembling on my lap and nodded. "One step," I repeated. Graham gave a small smile. "Exactly. No need to rush. We just need the right direction." Marilyn, seated beside me, added, "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? If you need it, we can arrange a secure place for a few days." I shook my head. "No. I want to go home. I need to. If I stay there one more night, he won't be suspicious." They exchanged a look, then both nodded. Graham handed me an envelope with copies of the paperwork and an emergency number. "Keep this on you. If he threatens you or touches you, call the police immediately." I held the file to my chest like something sacred. For the first time in years, I had a clear purpose. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was moving toward freedom. I got home at the usual hour, careful enough that my footsteps made no sound. Caleb was in front of the TV, beer in hand. He glanced over. "Why were you gone so long at the store?" "Crowded today," I said with a thin smile. He nodded, said nothing, and turned back to the game. I watched his shadow crawl across the wall, broad shoulders, lowered head, the flicker of the TV making his face look like two people at once, a lost boy and a stranger full of spite. I stepped into the kitchen, put the bags away, and started dinner. My hands shook a little, but my mind was steady. Every motion had a purpose. Chop the vegetables, rinse the meat, set the pot to boil. I thought through tomorrow's plan: bank, courthouse, then the protective order. Each step felt like a small stone laid across the river of fear I was about to cross. When Caleb went to bed, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in months. I set the file on the table and read each line carefully, stopping at the bold words, "Temporary protective order request." Below that was the signature line, "Applicant, Clara Hensley." Seeing my name on that paper made my heartbeat change, not from fear, but from hope. I sat down and wrote a few lines in the little notebook I keep by the bed. Tomorrow, I start again. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I deserve a life without fear. Outside, wind moved through the trees, dry leaves whispering like a quiet blessing. The warm light in my room pooled over the page, lighting up my shaky signature proof that this woman had decided to stand up. I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. In the dark, my heart still beat hard, but this time it wasn't panic. It was life. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't in despair anymore. I lay there listening to the clock tick, each beat a reminder. Just one more day, Clara. One more day and freedom begins. The next morning, the sky was softly gray, wind threading through the trees in front of the house, dry leaves spinning on the sidewalk. I put on an old brown coat to cover the bruise on my neck and wrapped a scarf around my shoulders. When Graham pulled up, I was on the porch with a small canvas bag, some important papers, and my last 3 $10 bills. He gave me a gentle smile, steady and warm. "All right, Clara?" I nodded, took a deep breath. Better than I thought. We drove to Franklin Community Bank, where I'd opened a joint account with Caleb 6 years ago when he was still pretending to be a good son. In my head, I could still hear him back then. "I'll help you manage it, Mom. You won't have to worry." Now, I knew I'd handed the keys to my life to the wrong person. Inside the lobby, the smell of floor cleaner mixed with coffee from the teller counter. A money counter hummed in the corner. My heart sped up, like every little beep was a reminder of the losses I'd been carrying. Graham went first and told the receptionist we had an appointment with Patricia Lawrence, the branch manager. A moment later, a woman around 50 in a navy suit came out with a professional smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Hensley. Come on back. I've been briefed by Mr. Porter's office." In a private room, Graham summarized the situation, calm but firm. Mrs. Hensley's son seized control of her finances, used an unauthorized secondary card, and there are signs of abuse. We want to restore full ownership to her. Patricia nodded and started typing. "Understood. We'll need to verify identity and have you re-execute the account ownership documents." My hand shook as I signed Clara Hensley. Those 3 words, just a formality on paper, made my chest ache. I hadn't signed my name on anything important in years. Every letter felt like a declaration. I still have authority over my own life. Patricia handed me a checklist of what we'd do. Cancel the secondary card in the name of Caleb Hensley. Change all PINs and passwords. Set up automatic alerts for any withdrawals. Each time she marked completed on her screen, I felt lighter, as if another cord had been cut from my hands. When we finished the last item, Patricia looked up and said gently, "Mrs. Hensley, from now on only you can access and use this account. If anyone else tries, our system will alert you and the bank immediately." I looked at her. then at Graham, unable to speak. A lump pressed hard in my throat. I had to breathe a few times before I could say, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me back a piece of my breath." Patricia smiled and touched my shoulder. "You don't owe anyone for this, Clara. You just took back what was already yours." When we stepped outside, sunlight was breaking through the clouds, catching the glass facade and turning it into something like a mirror. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth touch my skin, a feeling I thought I'd forgotten. Our next stop was the Franklin County Courthouse, a red brick building with high stone steps and heavy wooden doors. I clutched the file Marilyn had prepared: injury photos, my statement, copies of financial documents. With every step down the long hallway, my heart pounded. The waiting area outside the filing office was more crowded than I expected. Mostly women, some young, some well past 70. A brown-skinned woman sat beside me with a sleeping baby in her arms. Across from us, a silver-haired lady watched quietly, eyes that seemed to see entire lifetimes. I looked at them and recognized a version of myself in each face, women who had been quiet too long but chose to stand up today. When it was my turn, Graham went with me and turned in our packet. The clerk flipped through each page, checked the photos, then nodded. "Everything's in order. Judge Harper is on duty today. She's very fair." We waited nearly an hour before they called us in. Judge Harper, short hair, glasses, a serious face, read our file slowly, line by line. I held my breath as she turned to the last page. Then, she signed, swift and certain. "Temporary protective order, effective immediately." I stared at the words, hardly believing them. Harper looked up and said, "This order is in effect for 15 days. During that time, Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, from contacting you in any form, and is required to vacate the shared residence immediately. Enforcement will be handled by the police." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word rang through me like a bell. Required to vacate. I took the order, my hands shaking so hard the letters blurred. Graham touched my shoulder lightly. "This is your first legal shield, Clara. Keep it on you. Don't let it out of your sight." I nodded and swallowed back tears. That thin piece of paper, just a few lines of black on white, felt as heavy as my whole life. For the first time in years, the law stood. On my side, not his. "Now for the final step," Graham said as we left the courtroom. "Serve the order and make sure he leaves." I stopped in the lobby, my heart slamming. "Today? Right now. We'll go with the police. I won't let you face him alone." We drove to the Franklin police station. The intake room smelled like paper, ink, and old coffee. Graham presented the order and requested assistance. A young officer came out and introduced himself. "Officer Miguel Ramirez. I'll be handling this." He was tall and solid, his eyes steady but not cold. When we shook hands, he said, "Mrs. Hensley, we're here to protect you today. I need to confirm, do you believe he's home now?" I nodded. "Yes. He usually gets back before 6. It's just past 4:30. Good. We'll arrive before he expects us. I'll be the one to read the order. You stand behind me and don't say anything unless necessary." Graham looked at me, voice low and sure. It is the hardest part, Clara, and the most necessary. Remember, you've done nothing wrong. Everything you're doing today is to protect yourself." I gripped the file. Fear and relief pushed against each other inside me. It felt like climbing a steep hill with a cliff ahead and fire behind. There was no going back. As we got into the patrol car, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Light rain began to fall, pattering on the windshield and sliding into long streaks. Through the glass, I watched the trees blur. A drop rolled down my cheek. I couldn't tell if it was rain or a tear. Graham asked softly, "Clara, do you want me to speak before the officer reads the order?" I shook my head. "No, I want to witness it. I need to see it with my own eyes." Ramirez nodded. Good. When we arrive, just stand still. Mister, Porter and I will handle the rest. The car turned onto my street, the white picket fence coming into view. I drew a breath, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. My house, once a haven, then a prison, was about to be returned to its rightful owner. I tightened my fists and whispered a prayer. Lord, give me the strength to stand. We pulled up to the drive. Ramirez stepped out, the black rain shell draped over his shoulders. Graham turned to me with a small smile. It's time, Clara. I nodded and stepped onto the cold, wet ground. The order shook in my hand under the light rain, but I didn't hide it. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. Ramirez climbed the steps and knocked hard. The sound echoed through the rain into every wall that had held my fear. Footsteps inside, then Caleb's voice, rough as ever. Who is it? I swallowed and tightened my grip on the file. Franklin Police, Ramirez called, calm and clear. I need to speak with you, Caleb Hensley. With a single knock on the door, 7 years of fear cracked like glass. Do you feel that's the moment most worthy of saying enough? Tell me how it felt to you. In that moment, I realized every painful road I'd walked these 7 years led here, and I was ready to step out of my cage for good. The patrol car turned into my drive, its tires scraping over the wet gravel. Through the fogged window, I saw Caleb's silver pickup already parked by the garage. My chest tightened. He was home. Every cell in my body stretched taut, afraid, and determined. Officer Ramirez killed the engine and looked at me. Rain traced long lines down the windshield like time itself, long, cold, and irreversible. Clara, he said, voice low and crisp. When I go in, you stand behind me. Don't speak, don't argue, don't react if he gets heated. The law will handle it. Understand? I nodded, though my throat was dry. I understand. From the back seat, Graham handed me the order sealed in a plastic sleeve. Keep it in your hand. If he resists, just hold it up. Don't say a word. I squeezed the page until my palm warmed. Edit. One sheet of paper, the only thing between me and 7 years of terror. Ramirez opened the door and the rain rushed in, along with the heavy sound of boots on the wooden steps. He knocked 3 decisive times. The echo carried across the porch. I stood a few feet behind him, hearing my heart thud like a drum. The door swung open. Caleb stood there, hair a mess, wrinkled t-shirt, face flushed. His eyes slid past me and locked onto Ramirez. What the hell is this? He snarled. Why'd you bring cops to my house? Ramirez didn't budge. His tone stayed even. Mr. Hensley, this is not your house. This is the legal residence of Mrs. Clara Hensley. We're here to enforce a temporary protective order issued by the Franklin court this morning. For a second, Caleb's face went pale. Then it burned red. What? What kind of joke is this? He whipped toward me, voice scraping like metal. Mom, what did you do? I didn't answer. Ramirez took a half step forward, blocking his line to me. You have 60 minutes to collect essential belongings and leave. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Hensley. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. You don't have the right. We have a court order. Graham cut in, holding the paper out. You may read it, but you can't keep it. Caleb snatched it, eyes scanning fast. I watched his throat twitch and his jaw clamp tight. He started crumpling the page, but Ramirez stepped in, firm and final. You're obstructing enforcement. Calm down, gather your things, and go. In that instant, the person in his eyes was no longer the one who used to call me Mom in a small mourning voice. I saw only a stranger, furious at losing control. He backed up and slammed his palm against the wall. This isn't over, he hissed through his teeth. You think you've won? You'll regret humiliating me. Ramirez's hand rose to his belt, brushing cuffs. That's a threat, Mr. Hensley. I suggest you focus on packing. The house felt so heavy I could hear the rain tapping the window. Caleb growled and stomped up the stairs. Each thudding step hit my heart like an invisible blow. I stayed still. Graham murmured at my ear, "Don't watch, don't speak. Let the law do the talking." 30 minutes later, the clatter of things being thrown bounced down the stairwell suitcase, clothes, a couple pairs of shoes. He came into view with an old duffel slung over his shoulder, eyes still bloodshot. He stopped at the last step and stared hard at me. "I can't believe you did this to your own son." I swallowed and answered, quiet but firm, "I didn't do anything to you, Caleb. I chose to survive." He scoffed, smirked, then shoved the door open. The suitcase tumbled off the porch, popped open, and his clothes spilled into the rain. I didn't bend to pick them up. Ramirez motioned him away. When Caleb's engine growled, I heard the tires grind the gravel, spitting mud and water. Then, silence. The house felt shockingly empty. No more heavy footsteps. No more, "Where are you?" barked from the hall. No more looming shape in the kitchen every evening. Just the clock's steady tick and the smell of cooling coffee on the table. I stood there, hands still trembling, until Ramirez came back with a gentler tone. "Are you all right, Mrs. Hensley?" I nodded, lips moving before sound came. A long breath left me, carrying years of pressure with it. My knees gave and I sank into a chair, tears falling before I knew they were there. Ramirez set a hand on my shoulder, then made a slow circuit of the house. He checked windows, secured the back door, and jotted a few notes. "The kitchen window needs a new lock." I installed an extra latch on the front door. He pulled a small card and wrote a hotline on the back. "If he returns or even lingers outside, call 911 immediately. Don't go out, not even to talk. All right?" I nodded, my voice rough. "All right." Graham stepped forward and placed a slip of paper on the table. "This is my personal cell. Anytime you feel uneasy, day or night, call me." They left quietly. Ramirez paused on the threshold. "You were very brave today, Clara. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I watched them go as the door closed. The patrol car's engine faded until only the soft rain on the porch remained. I stood and walked the house slowly. Each step felt like a small pilgrimage through the living room, down the hall, into the kitchen where I'd been shoved to the floor. I laid my hand on the wooden table, on the fridge door, on the old photo of Evan, my husband. "Do you see this?" I whispered. I finally did it. I opened a window and let the air in. Cool wind poured through, carrying damp earth and wet leaves. I breathed deep and felt the quiet fill the space where boots, shouts, and anger had lived. For the first time in 7 years, the house was quiet and it wasn't scary. I towel-dried my hair, changed my shirt, and opened the fridge. A few vegetables, some potatoes, a bit of butter, and a packet of egg noodles. I set water to boil, chopped the vegetables, and seasoned with salt and pepper. Steam fogged the glass. My reflection in the mist wasn't the same woman who'd trembled here days ago. When the soup was ready, I brought it to the table. No candles, no flowers, no TV. Just me, a chipped ceramic bowl, and the clean smell of herbs. I lifted a spoon, blew on it, and tasted. It didn't taste like fear anymore. I ate slowly, spoon by spoon, tasting the light sweetness of the broth, the softness of the potatoes, the butter melting at the edge of my tongue. Each spoonful was a statement, "I am living. I have taken back the reins." Night fell. I sat by the window and watched the rain taper off. Streetlights hit the wet leaves and laid a soft orange on the road. Something in me unfolded not joy exactly, but a new, fragile peace. I murmured to myself, "Silence. But this time it's the silence of freedom." In the dark glass, I saw my own faint smile, shaky, small, but real. The next morning I woke not to pounding on a door, not to heavy footsteps, not to an angry voice. I heard only the soft clock and saw warm gold slipping through the curtains. For the first time in years, I woke in peace. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee just for me. No rushing, no flinching, no orders. I turned on the old radio and let a bit of jazz fill the quiet. A low saxophone curled through the smell of fresh coffee and the strip of sun on the floor. I pulled the curtains open and the window, too. No stale smoke, no spilled beer, just wood, sunlight, and the scent of roses from the small backyard. I sat at the table and watched the light fall across the ivory tablecloth, the same place that had held too many rages. Now it held only calm, a new beginning. At noon, I did something I hadn't dared in years. I called Nora Blake. Nora had been my closest friend before Caleb took over my life. We used to see plays, go to charity luncheons, swap recipes. Then one day I vanished from her world, excuses like tired, busy, not ready to see anyone. Truth was, I was ashamed. I didn't want her to see the bruises or ask, "What happened, Clara?" I dialed the number I still knew by heart. 3 rings. "Clara?" Nora's voice, a little unsteady. I choked up. "It's me. I'm sorry I disappeared for so long." There was a pause, then she burst into tears. "Oh God, Clara, I was afraid you were gone." I laughed through my own tears. We talked for 10 minutes, both of us breaking down more than once. Finally, Nora said, "Tomorrow, coffee at the old place? I'll reserve a table on the patio for us." I whispered, "I'll be there. This time, I can come." When I hung up, I sat for a long time, warm and aching all at once. Some friendships wait right where you left them until you're strong enough to come back. That afternoon, Mrs. Ellison, the elderly neighbor who'd given me Marilyn's card, appeared at the gate with a basket of oranges and a few sprigs of rosemary. "I heard it's over," she said, eyes gentle but sure. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm always home. I never lock my door." I squeezed her hand, trembling a little. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellison. You saved me, even if you don't realize it." She smiled. "I only planted a seed, Clara. You're the one who replanted your life." Night returned, and the house settled into quiet again. No TV noise, no clinking bottles, no slamming doors. But the quiet itself made me restless. Every muscle still held the old survival reflex, listening, bracing. I fully charged my phone and set it on the nightstand. Under the bed, I slid the old baseball bat Evan had used when he taught Caleb as a boy. Back then, it was a father-son memory. Now it helped me sleep. Near midnight, I heard something outside. A strange car idled at the curb, headlights brushing the window. I shot upright, heart racing. 10 seconds. 20. Then the engine revved and drove off. I took a breath, went to the window, and wrote the license plate down with a shaking hand. First thing in the morning, I called Graham and told him everything. "You did exactly right, Clara," he reassured me. "Caution is never wasted. I'll let Ramirez know to keep an eye on the area." Nothing else happened, but that alertness clung to me all day. I realized my body didn't yet know how to be safe. It needed to relearn how to breathe, to rest, to believe no one was standing right behind me. In the days that followed, I started learning how to live again. In the morning, I made coffee and put fresh flowers on the dining table. At noon, I walked around the neighborhood, the streets I used to avoid because I was afraid of meeting the neighbors' eyes. In the evening, I turned on warm lights throughout the house, read on the sofa, and listened to the songs Evan used to love. I learned how to sleep again, not with pills, but with breathing. Every night, I counted each inhale and exhale so my heart could relearn a normal rhythm. At first, I slept 2 hours, then 3, then 4. Every morning I woke to sunlight, I knew I was making progress. Marilyn called me every day at exactly 8 a.m. "Good morning, Clara. Have you had breakfast?" "I'm having coffee," I'd answer. sometimes laughing at how consistent she was. Very good. Today is the 6th day you've been safe. I want you to write that number down somewhere. It will remind you that with each passing day, you're a little stronger. Those calls, simple as they seemed, kept me from slipping into the void. She wasn't just a social worker anymore. She became the anchor that kept me in the present. A week later, a letter arrived from the present court, the hearing for a permanent protective order scheduled for 10 days later. I read it carefully, my heart full of worry and resolve. It would be my first time telling everything in court, possibly in front of Caleb. I began to prepare. Every day, I practiced my statement like it was a survival drill, brief, honest, and not reactive. Graham warned. He'll try to say you're confused, exaggerating, or out for revenge. Let the truth stand on its own. You don't need emotion, just clarity. I wrote the key points on paper: times, places, and the level of abuse. Medical evidence, injury photos, and the police report. Statements from Marilyn and Officer Ramirez. Each time I read it, my hands shook less. My voice grew steadier. I practiced looking straight into the mirror and asked myself, if my son stood in front of me now, would I be afraid? And each day the answer became clearer. No, I'm not afraid anymore. One afternoon, Nora stopped by, with a still warm apple pie. I hear you're practicing your statement, she said, setting the pie on the table. But remember, Clara, your words are not just evidence, they're the story of a survivor. Anyone who hears it, including the judge, will feel that. I looked at her and smiled slightly. You still talk like a philosophy teacher, Nora. She winked. Because I used to teach philosophy, remember? We both laughed for the first time. A laugh rang through this house without making me flinch. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The sky was calm, the moon full and bright, lighting up the little garden. The rose beds I'd neglected were blooming again slowly but surely. I breathed in, smelling earth and grass. I thought about the simple things I'd forgotten. Sitting still, breathing, living. No need to prove anything, no need to bow my head, no need to ask permission. In that gentle darkness, I spoke softly, not to anyone in Terriu. Particular, just to myself. I'm still here, I'm still alive, and I will never be silent again. I tilted my face to the sky. No more rain, no more shadows falling across the window. Only moonlight, night wind, and crickets humming like an old song coming back to life. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, one breath of freedom, of real life. And for the first time, I felt something simple I had forgotten for 7 years. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's knowing you're no longer afraid of it. The hallway at the Franklin courthouse was packed that morning. The smell of coffee mingled with old paper, shoes clicked on stone floors, and small conversations rolled around me like waves. I sat on a bench, fingers laced together, palms cold with sweat. Next to me was Graham in a gray suit and deep blue tie, calm, as if he could organize a storm with just a look. On my other side, Marilyn sat quietly, a file in her hands, laying a gentle hand on my shoulder now, and then, as if to say, I'm here. The courtroom door opened, and I saw him. Caleb. He came from the opposite hall in a white dress shirt and black slacks. Hair combed his face so polished it made my skin crawl. A tall man in glasses walked with him, likely his lawyer. His eyes swept past me, then paused. In that moment, I saw what I'd known for 7 years, arrogance and challenge. But this time, I didn't lower my head. Graham murmured. Look straight ahead, Clara. Don't let him control the air. I nodded and drew a breath. I know. When the clerk called our case, I stood. My legs trembled a little, but I didn't need anyone to hold me up. We entered the courtroom, where Judge Harper was already on the bench, the same short-haired woman with a gaze both stern and even. I remembered her voice from the temporary order. Today it rang out again. Hearing on the petition for a permanent protective order between Mrs. Clara Hensley and Mr. Caleb Hensley now in session. The room fell still. I could hear the wall clock ticking. Harper looked at me. Mrs. Hensley, please explain why you're requesting the order. Graham gave a small nod, as if to say, be yourself. I stood, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I glanced at the benches filled with strangers, but I felt many eyes of sympathy. I began slow and low. Your Honor, I lived with my son Caleb for 7 years. In those 7 years, I lost things one by one: my money, my friends, my health, and my own voice. It started with, Mom, let me hold your money for safety, and turned into having to ask permission to buy my own medicine. I eventually couldn't choose my meals, couldn't sing in the kitchen, couldn't open a window. And if I forgot those rules, I was reminded by hands, not words. I heard someone in the room hold their breath. Harper nodded for me to continue. The breaking point, I said, my voice shaking, was a Thursday night. I made soup, the dish my son used to like. He flipped the whole pot onto the floor and called it trash. When I reacted, he slapped me, then turned on the TV like nothing had happened. That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, and I understood, if I didn't act, I would die right there in that kitchen. Harper made a few notes. Go on, Mrs. Hensley. I'm not asking the court to punish my son, I said slowly, looking straight at her. I'm not trying to get revenge. I just want peace in my own home. I want to live without fear every time I hear footsteps. Graham nodded slightly. Marilyn pressed her lips together, eyes a little wet. The judge turned to the other side. Mr. Caleb Hensley, your response? Caleb stood, tugged at his collar, and smirked. Your Honor, my mother. Her memory isn't what it used to be. She trips a lot, spills food, then thinks I hit her. I only helped her clean up. She's clumsy, forgetful, and tends to imagine things. I've never laid a hand on her. I closed my eyes. That voice, slick and confident, had once made me doubt myself. Harper gestured to Graham. Graham stood and pulled 3 photos from the file. Your Honor, these were taken by social worker Marilyn Ortega on March 8th, one day after the incident. The bruising on the left cheek and wrist is consistent with impact from a slap and compression from gripping, not from a fall. Harper took the photos, studied them closely, then looked at Caleb. Do you have any other explanation for these injuries? His attorney cut in, cool and flat. Your Honor, there are no direct witnesses and no medical records. Everything relies on a one-sided account. Graham answered immediately, without checking his notes. Exactly. Domestic violence happens behind closed doors. If we required a witness every time, no woman would live long enough to tell the story. The room went silent. Harper set down her pen. Objection noted. Caleb leaned forward. My mother is trying to ruin my reputation. She needs a psychiatrist, not a protective order. Harper tapped the gavel. Order! This is not a place for shouting. I looked at him. For the first time, what I saw in his eyes wasn't an almighty rage, but a panic leaking through the mask. Harper turned back to me. Anything further before the court rules? I breathed in. I just want to be allowed to lock my door without fearing someone will break in. I want to listen to music, call friends, plant flowers, and sleep without jolting awake. I'm not asking for more, just the right to be at peace for the rest of my life. The room was so quiet I could hear the first drops of rain against the window. Harper reviewed the file one last time, then lifted her head and spoke clearly, each word like a stamp. The court orders. A protective order of 3 years is granted to Mrs. Clara Hensley. Mr. Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her and from contacting her by any means. Any violation results in immediate arrest. Mr. Caleb Hensley must complete a minimum 6-month anger management program. The gavel struck. Thud. It all ended with a dry, unexpectedly simple sound. Caleb froze, then turned away without a word. I didn't look after him. I only heard the rear door of the courtroom close. Graham rested a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "It's done, Clara." I nodded. No cheers, no bursting tears. Just one long breath, deep, full, and real. Marilyn squeezed my hand. "You did it. You told the truth, and the court listened." I looked at the two of them, then around the room I once thought I'd never have the courage to enter. When we stepped outside, the rain had just stopped. Water streaks on the steps caught the afternoon sun, reflecting three figures walking away: a lawyer, a social worker, and an older woman holding tight to a sheet of paper that would protect her. I wasn't joyful. I just felt lighter. I had survived, and I was still walking. At the courthouse threshold, I paused and looked up at the pale blue sky after rain. I said softly, just for myself, it wasn't justice that brought me back, it was the truth. And today, I dared to speak it. Then I walked down the steps, slow and steady, like someone relearning how to walk on her own legs. The weeks after the hearing passed in a quiet I thought I'd never have again. No more cars stopping suddenly at the gate, no more knocks that made my heart seize. Only ordinary sounds: crows on the porch, dry leaves brushing the roof, the drip of a leaky faucet. I began to love those sounds, as if they proved that real life had returned. Every morning I woke early, made coffee, and played soft music. Light streamed through the living room window and fell across the floor where I used to sit and cry for hours. Now, I laid out a few sheets of white paper and pulled out. My old watercolor set, the one I'd tucked away when Caleb moved in. I started painting again, fine strokes, gentle washes. The first painting was the backyard garden where the roses had begun to bloom after years of neglect. Each time the brush touched water, I felt my heartbeat ease and steady. I realized art wasn't just for beauty, it was how a strangled heart loosens. One afternoon, after the sun had faded, I checked the mailbox as usual. A few bills, a flyer, and an envelope with no return address. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single folded white sheet with a scrawl in ballpoint pen. "It's not over." The paper slipped from my fingers onto the porch. My heart pounded. I didn't need to guess that handwriting was Caleb's. I'd seen it hundreds of times on bills and notes he'd left on the table. I stood still for a few seconds, then went inside, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. I called 911, my voice shaky but clear. "This is Clara. Hensley. I have a 3-year protective order against my son. Today I received a threatening letter in his handwriting." The dispatcher reassured me and said a patrol would come to take a report. Graham arrived in half an hour. He examined the paper, put on gloves, and slipped it into a plastic sleeve. "Good, Clara. You didn't handle it much. The prints should be intact." "God," I whispered. "I thought it was over." Graham looked at me not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. "I know the feeling. But you did the right thing. This reaction calling right away shows you're living proactively now, not as a victim." That night, I sat on my bed without turning on the light. The door was locked, the curtains drawn, but I could still hear my heart pounding like a drum. Every sound outside made me tense. The baseball bat stayed under the bed, my phone fully charged, the flashlight on the nightstand. I kept telling myself, "I'm safe. There's police patrol. Everything has been logged." Sleep still didn't come. 2 days later, Ramirez called, his voice low and urgent. "Clara, we picked him up last night at a bar on 5th Street. He was drunk and loudly saying he'd make my mother pay. We have witnesses and video. You're safe for now." I dropped into a chair. In my head, I heard someone exhale. I wasn't sure if it was me or someone else. "You're sure?" "Sure. He's being held for 72 hours while we investigate the protective order violation and the threats. After I hung up, I looked out the window at the drizzle. I thought I'd feel relief, but what came was emptiness. Caleb had once been the baby in my arms, the child who giggled at bedtime stories. Now he was the man police had to cuff for threatening his own mother. That feeling loss and release at the same time cut both ways. That afternoon, Graham called again. "Clara, I know you feel empty. But remember, Caleb made his choices. You only protected." I was quiet for a while, then said, "I know. But sometimes understanding it with my head doesn't mean my heart catches up." "True. But your heart will relearn just like you relearned how to breathe." 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him. I didn't attend, but Graham did and reported back. Caleb received 8 months in jail for violating the protective order, plus making threats against someone's life. He was also ordered to complete anger management and mandatory psychological treatment after release. When I heard, I just nodded. Not happy, not sad. Just a slow calm spreading like a lake after a hard rain. I knew justice can't fix everything, but at least it can stop the cycle. Marilyn stopped by that afternoon. She set a small notice on my table. "The community center is starting a support group for survivors. You should join. They need to hear your story, and you need to hear theirs." I hesitated, then agreed. So every Tuesday afternoon, I went to the center. A small room, beige walls, chairs in a circle. Some were young, some older, some with fresh purple marks at their wrists. When it was my turn, I spoke no crying, no shaking, just told it. About fear, about the mirror that no longer showed me, about the judge's gavel. When I finished, a young woman beside me took my hand. "Thank you, I don't feel alone anymore." That night, I came home and looked at my half-finished rose painting. I picked up the brush and added a few highlights, new petals blooming in the corner. For the first time, I realized my life was being repainted too. The next week, Marilyn held a personal safety skills training for the group. I went and learned how to recognize stalking, preserve digital evidence, and use a safety code when calling the police. I learned to create strong passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, and delete old accounts Caleb might know. At one point, I laughed. Turns out a 69-year-old woman can learn cybersecurity like a college student. Marilyn smiled softly. "You're not just learning, you're taking back control." Those sessions made me feel more confident. Each small step, jotting down a strange license plate, sending a report email, checking the door locks, was a reminder I wasn't helpless anymore. One evening, after locking up, I stood on the porch and looked at the block. Everything was wonderfully ordinary, Mrs. Ellison's porch light, soft music from a neighbor's house, a dog barking down the street. I understood that healing isn't a single bright moment. It's a string of repeated choices. Choosing to get up, choosing to trust, choosing to keep going. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and lay down. In the dark, the soft tick of the clock no longer scared me. Each little beat was a beat of freedom. I smiled and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll paint again. Maybe this time I'll paint the sky." And as my eyes closed, I knew I had truly started to live again. On the first morning of that spring, I stood in the living room, the room that had seen me bow and apologize for things that weren't my fault. Sunlight slanted through the window, drawing long beams across the tile. I looked around and decided it was time to repaint. I chose pale peach, the pink touched with orange that looks like dawn on a wall after rain. As I rolled on the first coat, the sweet, sharp smell of new paint spread, making me cough lightly and warming my chest at the same time. Each pass of the roller covered old marks, places once dented by a fist, cracks from a rage. Now those walls held a different breath, mine. When I finished, I stepped back to admire it. The afternoon light bounced off the peach and onto Evan's framed photo, making his face look like it held a smile. I said softly, "Do you see it? I finally brought light back into this house. I turned Caleb's room into a studio. not to erase him, but to rewrite the memory. I spread an old drop cloth over the floor, set an easel by the window, threw the curtains wide for the breeze. On the wall, I hung roses, skies, and one unfinished piece I titled Reclaiming. Every added brushstroke was me taking back a piece of myself that had been squeezed into silence. One afternoon, while clearing an old drawer for supplies, I found a stack of bank statements Graham had told me to review. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. The more I read, the deeper my frown. There were small, regular withdrawals, $100, $200 from my retirement account, labeled for Caleb. I didn't remember agreeing to them all. When I totaled it, the final number made my hand stop. $4,972. It wasn't just money. It was the proof of years I'd been controlled without noticing. I called Graham and told him. He listened and said simply, "We'll file a civil claim for reimbursement." He may not have the money to pay, but it's symbolic, a clear message that Clara Hensley is silent no more. I thought a moment, then nodded. "Do it, Graham. I want the rest of the world to know I stood up." A few weeks later, when the paperwork went out, I felt like a chapter had closed. Not because I wanted to win, but to prove that I existed and that my existence had value. I started attending senior yoga at the community center. The first time I bent forward, my knees ached, my back popped, and I laughed. "This body has taken a lot of hits, but it still knows how to stand back up," I told the instructor. She laughed too and squeezed my hand gently. After a few weeks, I slept better. My breathing slowed, and I woke without that heaviness in my chest. My body was learning how to live again. So was I. Marilyn visited on a quiet afternoon. She brought an envelope and her gentle smile. "We have something for you," she said, opening it to reveal a white certificate with a blue border. Certificate of Survivor Recovery, awarded to Clara Hensley for resilience, courage, and healing. I stared at it, feeling a current run through my heart. Tears came, but they weren't bitter. Smiling through them, I said, "This is the first certificate I've received that only proves I'm still alive." Marilyn took my hand. "And living in your own way." That night, I set the certificate on my desk beside Reclaiming. The lamp lit the word Survivor. I read it again and again until my throat tightened. I started volunteering at the shelter women in the very first days of fleeing abuse. My tasks were small: make breakfast, brew coffee, tidy rooms, and sometimes share my story when someone wanted to hear it. Each time I spoke, some women cried, some stared at me, surprised that someone so calm had lived through hell. I told them, "We're not weak. We just had to be strong alone for too long. Now it's time to learn a different strength, asking for help." A young woman once asked me, "Do you regret reporting your son?" I was quiet for a moment, then answered, "What good is regret if the price is your life?" Real love doesn't require silence to survive. My son chose his path. I only chose to live. Every time I left the center, I felt lighter. By telling the story, I was opening a door for others to step through. I learned something new too: how to say no and how to say I need help. Before I worried about burdening people, afraid I'd be judged as weak. Now I know loving myself isn't selfish. When I say no to what harms me, I'm saying yes to peace. Every night I journaled. Not much, just a few lines, but it became a habit. I wrote down small things. Today I poured coffee without spilling. I laughed looking at Evan's old photos. I slept 5 full hours without a scary dream. At the bottom of each page, I wrote the same line: "Don't go back to the dark." It wasn't just a reminder, it was a vow. One weekend evening, I invited Nora and Mrs. Ellison for dinner. Not a big party, just lasagna, a little salad, and a bottle of red wine I'd been saving. I put fresh roses in the center of the table and played soft music. When they arrived, sunset still lingered in the window frames, tinting the house a warm gold. Nora hugged me tight. "This house looks different, Clara. It has life." I smiled. "It only reflects the person living in it." We ate and talked, told old stories, sometimes laughing until we cried. When I poured the wine, my hand didn't shake. I realized I was no longer afraid of the clink of glasses or a man's loud laugh. No memory held this meal captive anymore. After dinner, Nora helped me wash the dishes while Mrs. Ellison watered the garden. When everything was done, I looked at them, two women who had once witnessed my collapse, now witnessing my recovery. I spoke softly, almost like a confession. There was a time I lived only to be afraid. Now, I live to be grateful. Nora smiled and laid a hand on my shoulder. And to teach others how to stand up. I smiled and looked out the window. Night had fallen, and the moonlight reflected off the pale peach walls I had just painted. No more shadows in the corners, only light, gentle, honest, and mine. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In a room filled with laughter, I could hear my own heartbeat again, calm, slow, steady. I knew this was no longer the house where I had been imprisoned. This was where I got to live for real. I began that morning by spreading the old ivory tablecloth, the very table where I had been humiliated, shouted at, made to feel like nothing. But today, it was different. Today, this table would become a table of freedom. I wiped every corner clean and set white roses in a glass vase at the center. I chose the crystal wine glasses Evan had bought for our 50th anniversary. I hadn't dared bring them out for a long time because in this house, beautiful things had once become excuses for contempt. Now, I wanted to return them to their original worth. In the kitchen, herb-roasted chicken filled the air with warmth, the scent of happiness and peace. I seasoned with salt, added a few sprigs of rosemary and slices of lemon, then brushed on a little honey to crisp the skin. The oven ticked, signaling the time had come. While I waited, I prepared a tray of vegetables. Carrots, squash, potatoes, simple and comforting. Last was my mother's chocolate cake, the recipe I hadn't made since she passed. I set everything on the table. The roast chicken in the middle, bright vegetables alongside, the fragrant cake at the end. Candlelight shimmered through glasses of red wine, and light danced across the pale peach walls. The house felt warm, no heavy footsteps, no sharp breaths of fear, only the quiet breath of peace. Right at 7 o'clock, guests began to arrive. Marilyn came, first the same steady smile, now lighter. She brought a bouquet of sunflowers. "Flowers for those who keep their heads high," she said. I hugged her and whispered, "And for those who no longer bow." Graham arrived next, as put together as always, but softer in the face. "I brought something. Lawyers rarely bring wine, not paperwork," he said, lifting a bottle of Bordeaux. Nora and Mrs. Ellison came together, hand in hand like old friends. Nora carried a basket of fresh, crusty bread, and Mrs. Ellison brought a mint teapot. "For ending dinner, not starting an argument," she joked, making me laugh. Lastly, 3 women from the community book group, the ones I'd met through Marilyn's support circle. They had once come to the shelter seeking refuge. Now they were starting over. One had just gotten a job at the library. One was about to move into her own place. And the other was still in therapy. I wanted them here, because this dinner wasn't only for me, it was for everyone who had walked through the dark and was still standing. The house filled with voices, soft laughter humming like background music. When everyone sat down, Graham looked around the table and raised his glass. To Clara, someone who didn't just survive, but bloomed. The table went quiet for a few seconds. Then glasses clinked. I smiled, eyes wet. "If anything bloomed, it's because you were the light that helped me sprout again." Marilyn leaned in, her voice warm. "Clara, you chose to live, to fight, to heal. Many come here to be rescued, but you rescued yourself. That's extraordinary." I went still. Her words drifted through the room and touched each person around the table. I looked from face to face, each one reflecting their own story, scars and pain, but also light. I spoke, small but sure. For years, I waited for someone to save me. Then one day, I understood no one was coming. If I wanted to live, I had to be the one to walk out of that. I kept waiting to be loved while I didn't dare love myself. Saving yourself isn't selfish, it's the first act of love. Nora nodded, eyes shining. Clara, I've never seen you stronger. When you turn pain into compassion, you don't just live, you give others life. The candles whispered. The roast chicken scented the air. I invited everyone to eat. The soft ring of cutlery on plates rose up familiar, but with a different note. Not the sound of a forced meal, but of a life chosen. Graham told a few funny stories about cases he'd won. Mrs. Ellison chimed in with a tale about a neighbor who planted a tree without the HOA's permission, and the whole table shook with laughter. One of the book club women, Margaret, shared about her first job interview after divorce. I was so nervous I called the interviewer officer instead of HR director. Everyone burst out laughing. That laughter, natural, full, unforced, caught in my throat. It was a sound I had lost and just found again. After the main course, I brought out the chocolate cake. My mother's recipe, I said. She always said the best cake is made with shaky hands and a steady heart. Graham grinned. Then it must be excellent tonight. I sliced the cake and served each piece. When the last slice hit a plate, Marilyn looked at me and said softly, Clara, you've come full circle, from pain to peace. But the best part is, you didn't stop at surviving, you chose to love life again. I was quiet, lifting my eyes to the candlelight. I think surviving is a blessing, but loving life after it has crushed you, that's the miracle. Outside, the sky was clear and full of stars. A night breeze carried the scent of roses through the window. In the kitchen, dishes clinked as everyone helped clean up ordinary sounds I once feared, now pleasant. I leaned in the doorway, watching them, listening to their laughter, and felt a sudden swell in my chest. The house that had been a cage was now a refuge. The pale peach walls reflected the soft candlelight as if they were cradling every bit of laughter. I whispered, not sure to whom, life has returned. When everyone left, I walked them to the gate. Mrs. Ellison turned back and hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Clara. Tonight you didn't just host a dinner, you held a ceremony for your own soul. I smiled, eyes damp. Thank you for planting the seed that day. No, you're the one who made it bloom. When the gate closed, I went back inside. The kitchen still held the scent of cake, wine, and human warmth. I looked at the table now, washed with moonlight through the window, and felt an odd, clear peace. I sat, poured a little leftover wine, lifted my glass, and whispered to myself, to peace, to those who walked through the dark, to me. I set the glass down and looked outside. Deep down, I truly wished Caleb peace. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry hate any longer. Forgiveness, I now understood, isn't about erasing the past. It's about freeing yourself from its chains. That night when I went to bed, I looked at the door. The lock was still there, but I didn't slide the bolt. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't need to. For the third time in my life, I slept without locking the door. A small act, but a big moment. And before I drifted off, I knew I had truly returned to life, to the light, to myself. I began each morning with a small ritual, a hot cup of tea, sunlight spilling onto the porch, and a leather-bound journal waiting on the table. On the first page, written in blue ink, it says, 3 things I'm grateful for today. It's a habit I learned in group therapy. And for almost a year now, my first line has always been the same. 1. I'm grateful for myself. I'm grateful for the woman who didn't give up on those nights when there seemed to be nothing left to believe in. Grateful for these hands shaking but still opening the door to step into the light. Grateful for this heart cracked but still brave enough to love life again. Second, I usually write, I'm grateful for this home. Because now it's no longer a prison. It's a place of peace, of morning music, of the lavender I just replanted on the porch. And third, I'm grateful for the people who walked with me: Marilyn, Graham, Nora, Mrs. Ellison, and the women I met at the shelter. Each is a piece of the mosaic of my return. Now I keep a new rule: clear boundaries, kindness with limits. I've updated my security system, saved emergency numbers, and set up a camera at the front door. But more important are the invisible fences, emotional boundaries. I no longer apologize for needing quiet. I no longer accept things just to keep others comfortable. Boundaries, I've learned, aren't distance. They are the outline of self-respect. Every week I still go to the shelter not as someone in need, but as the woman who leads the craft class. I named the workshop From Fear to Creating. We cut paper, mix colors, knit. Some hands shake so much they can barely hold scissors, but the cuts get steadier. I tell them, our voices were taken for a while, but when we make something, even a small card, we're saying, I exist. One session, a young woman came up to me, eyes red. Mrs. Clara, I don't know when I'll ever feel as at peace as you. I smiled and held her hand. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes little by little, every time you choose yourself over fear. The civil case is still moving forward. Graham updates me often. He says that even if Caleb can't fully repay, the court accepting the case is already a win. The money may never come, he said, but your dignity is back where it belongs. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want acknowledgement that I'm not weak, not controlled. This time the courthouse isn't only where justice is carried out, it's where my passage through is affirmed. On the front porch, I replanted lavender, the flower Evan loved. Years ago, it withered from neglect. Now, as I turn the soil, the scent drifts through the breeze, sweet and clean. Every morning I water it and watch each stem reach up. A neighbor passing by said, "That looks beautiful, like it's brand new." I smiled. It's not new, just given a chance to bloom again, like me. One evening, I opened my journal and wrote a letter to myself from 7 years ago. Clara, from 7 years ago, I know you're afraid. I know you think silence will keep the peace. But silence doesn't save anyone, it only makes the dark bigger. One day, you will stand up. You will find people who believe you, and more importantly, you will believe yourself again. When that day comes, you'll see. You were never weak. You were made to forget your strength. Forgive yourself for taking so long to see it. Clara of today. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, the one that used to hold bills and painful papers. Now it holds the memory of someone who survived and is living well. The next morning, when the first light came through the window, I looked around the house, everything bathed in sunlight. I understood something I couldn't have 7 years ago. Freedom isn't a destination. It's a habit. Freedom is making tea without hearing a shout. Freedom is opening a window without fearing footsteps. Freedom is laughing without looking around first. And freedom is choosing, each day, to live a little more with gratitude and courage. I set a pitcher of lemonade in the center of the table like Evan and I used to do whenever we had company. But today, it wasn't for people who scared me, it was for friends who made me feel warm. I added a few mint leaves, and the fresh scent spread through the room. This house once witnessed my collapse. Now it witnesses my return. I went out to the porch, sat in the wicker chair, watched the wind move through the lavender, and listened to children laughing next door. In that moment, I gently closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said to myself softly, just loud enough for the breeze to hear, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. If someone asked me now, what changed your life? I wouldn't say the law or the help. I would say, it was a choice on an ordinary morning when I decided not to endure anymore. Freedom, I learned, begins with a small choice, the choice not to be silent. and I know someone hearing this today may be in a dark room like I once was. I only want them to hear one thing. The light doesn't disappear. It's just waiting for you to open the door. Thank you for staying with me to the very last lines. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe a small kitchen that smells like morning coffee, or a quiet room late at night. But if anything I've said made your heart stir even once, please leave me a small sign, a comment, a hello, or simply the name of the city where you live. Because somewhere out there, someone might read it in silence and find the faith to begin again. If this story touched you, please tap like or subscribe. So when the next stories of courage, healing, and freedom are told, you'll be there again like an old friend returning. Every comment you leave is a small light for those still lost in the dark. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, for listening, and for still believing that freedom, even late, always finds its way home.
Mrs. Whitford, I'm sorry, but I saw this and I haven't been able to sleep. The photographer's trembling voice came through the phone. On my computer screen, she zoomed in on a photo from my daughter's wedding, and instantly, my blood pressure seemed to drop into a void. In the frame, my daughter's newlywed husband was pressing a red-haired woman against a wall, his hand wrapped around her back, their lips touching as if they had never belonged to Jacqueline. The worst part, the photo was taken exactly 2 hours before the ceremony. I collapsed into my chair, my breathing scattered. But then a cold thought slipped in. If this was real, then everything that had happened over the past 3 months, from the strange money requests to my younger daughter's disrespect, carried a very familiar scent: manipulation. And I realized this battle had only just begun. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I sat frozen in my familiar workspace, the room filled with the scent of pine and varnish, the place where I'd spent decades building our small family woodworking shop in Scottsdale. Yet Marcy Donalds's voice still echoed in my ears like a final alarm before disaster. I was 68, widowed for 8 years, believing my life, though lonely, was at least stable, until an unknown number called and pulled me into a storm I never imagined. "You need to come to my studio as soon as possible. Alone," Marcy said. "Please don't tell Jackie, not yet." That one sentence sent a chill straight down my spine. My eldest daughter, Jacqueline Whitford, or Jackie as people called her, had been married only 3 weeks. A grand wedding at a resort in Fountain Hills, where I'd spent almost $70,000 just to see my daughter happy, stepping into a new life with the man she believed was right, Daniel Foster, a polished, soft-spoken financial specialist who seemed so genuine even I told myself more than once, she found the right one. But I no longer trusted the things I told myself. Ever since Jackie's wedding, I'd noticed small but heavy changes. She visited less, but every visit came with money requests. The way she spoke, the way her eyes scanned my house as if evaluating assets, it all unsettled me, though I ignored it. Who wants to think poorly of their own child? And then, this morning, Marcy's call ripped the last veil away. I shut my laptop, trying to stand, but my legs felt like they no longer belonged to me. I braced against the table, feeling as if all the air had been pulled out of the room. I exhaled shakily, and from the living room, Lily's voice struck me like a slap. "Mom, where's your credit card? I need to put down a deposit to fix Brandon's car." I closed my eyes. Since Lily and her boyfriend, Brandon, had moved in temporarily, I thought I was helping her through a rough patch after losing her job. but temporarily had stretched into 4 years. Brandon lay around the house like he owned it, and Lily needed a few $100s from me every week for one reason or another. I stepped out of my workspace, already exhausted, before speaking. "Lily, I'm busy. We'll talk later." "Later? You're always later." "I already told you Brandon's car broke down, or do you want me to be embarrassed out there on the street?" She said, embarrassed? As if I were the reason she was ashamed, not the 35-year-old man refusing to get a job. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the kitchen for a glass of water, hiding the tremble in my hands. Then Marcy texted, "Mrs. Whitford, I'm really worried about you. Please come see me tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything clearly." I set the phone down, feeling my heartbeat in a hollow space inside my chest. I didn't know what scared me more, the truth hiding in that photograph or the idea of having to tell my daughter. That evening, after a dinner, Lily and Brandon didn't bother to clean up. The doorbell rang. Jackie stepped inside, perfect as always. Cream blazer, expensive handbag, golden hair curled neatly. "Hi, Mom." She kissed my cheek, then sat on the sofa. "Daniel and I want to buy a house, a place in North Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, pool, great view. We just need you to help with $40,000 for the down payment." Just need you to help. She said it as if I were financially responsible for her marriage, as if the nearly $70,000 I had spent on the wedding wasn't a big deal, as if being widowed and running the woodworking shop alone for 8 years was invisible. I asked softly, "You need it that urgently?" Jackie looked at me as though my question was the unreasonable part. "Of course, Mom. The market's hot. Daniel and I have seen that house 3 times already. I'm telling you tonight because I know you'll help. You always do." I looked into her eyes and realized her smile didn't reach them. It was the smile of someone used to being given what they wanted, someone used to taking without offering anything in return. I nodded, neither agreeing nor refusing. She hugged me, a cold hug, then left. The headlights of her Mercedes swept across the living room window before disappearing, leaving the house in darkness. I stood still for a moment, then turned toward the kitchen. Dirty dishes, pizza boxes on the table, Brandon's shoes in the middle of the floor. I no longer felt like the homeowner, but like a resource for the selfish adults I had raised. I returned to my workspace, shut the door, and sighed deeply. The pine wall I had built myself last year felt like it was closing in on me. The darkness outside the window blended with the darkness inside me, and for the first time I wondered, how long has it been since I lived for myself? That night, I reopened Marcy's message, staring at the last line. "I believe you need to know." I was a strong woman, but my eyes stung so sharply I covered them with my hand. Not because I feared the truth in the photo, but because if this was real, my entire family had been built on a lie, a very expensive lie. I sat at the edge of my bed, my hand still shaking. I thought of my husband, Jonathan, and wondered what he would do. He always taught me to trust myself, even when trust in others became difficult. And in that moment, I knew Jonathan would never want me to close my eyes and let this slide. I lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. I heard Lily and Brandon laughing loudly in the living room, every burst of laughter stabbing through my thoughts each time I closed my eyes. I felt like I was living with strangers. By 3 a.m., I was still awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the darkness. If this is real, Eleanor, you need to prepare for the worst. And I knew. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Marcy Donalds. No matter how cruel the truth might be, I had no way back now. I had to face it. I had to know why the man my daughter married had embraced another woman just 2 hours before his vows. And more importantly, I had to know when my family had drifted so far from love and whether I had the strength to pull myself out of the wreckage. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The Scottsdale sky was barely light, a pale blue veil over the distant McDowell Mountains. I tried to sip coffee, but the familiar smell did nothing to soothe the dull ache behind my eyes. I inhaled deeply, slipped on an old cardigan, and walked to my car. The drive to Marcy's studio felt longer than usual, maybe because I saw everything through the fog of my own dread. Her studio sat in the quiet arts district, a red brick building with large glass windows. I stood at the door for a few seconds, gripping my purse strap before pushing it open. The bell chimed softly, and Marcy appeared immediately. Her face was pale, her eyes apologetic. "Mrs. Whitford, thank you for coming," she said in a hoarse whisper. I nodded, afraid my voice would crack if I spoke. She led me through the small gallery into the editing room where a large monitor waited. Wedding photos I once admired now weighed heavily on my chest. Marcy sat, her hands trembling slightly as she moved the mouse. I need to say this first. I didn't go looking for these. I was adjusting lighting to finalize the album, but when I saw them, she stopped, inhaled shakily. Seconds later, the photo I'd seen the night before appeared again, sharper now, undeniable. Every detail of Daniel's face, every finger pressing into that woman's waist, the way her red hair lifted in the breeze, their expressions so familiar, so intimate. I swallowed hard. "Could you zoom in again?" She did, and when the image filled the screen, I saw the slim diamond wedding band on the woman's ring finger. A wedding ring! That realization forced me to sit. "I don't know who she is," Marcy whispered. I checked the guest list. No one matches her. I steadied my voice. "And the timestamp?" She pulled up the metadata. Date, hour, GPS. Everything aligned perfectly with the venue. I didn't understand all the technical language, but the data was clear. Numbers don't lie. 2 hours before the ceremony, I repeated, the words like stones in my mouth. Marcy nodded. I looked at the screen, but my mind drifted far away. Outside the room, I heard the city waking up, but everything felt muffled under the pounding of my heart. I remembered Daniel's warm smile, the vows he spoke. All of it now felt like a carefully crafted performance. "Why?" I whispered without meaning to. "Why marry my daughter if—" I couldn't finish. Marcy placed a small USB drive on the table. "Everything is here. The photos, the data, everything I found. I don't know what you'll do next, but I thought you should have it." I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing, yet felt heavy enough to break my spine. "Why are you helping me?" I murmured. She touched my arm lightly. "Because if I were the mother of the bride, I would want to know the truth." I couldn't recall how I left the studio. I only remembered sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel while sunlight pierced through the windshield, as if trying to expose the truth I wished I hadn't seen. I sat there for a long time until sweat dampened my palms. Driving home, Jackie's words from last night replayed in my head. "You only need to help 40,000. You always take care of us." I had thought it was entitlement, but now, with the photos in my purse, the picture sharpened into something much darker. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just fake love. This was a plan executed with precision. The lavish wedding paid by me. The demand for cash gifts only, Daniel's flawless behavior, Jackie's sudden change after the wedding. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed the image I dreaded. Money. Nothing else was the motive. I remember Jackie rising from the sofa the night before, tossing out, "I told Daniel you'd agree. You always take care of us." Yes, I had taken care of them. I had raised them with every ounce of love I had. But somewhere along the way, they began seeing me as a resource, not a mother. A cold wave ran down my spine, not because of Daniel's infidelity, but because my own children had started tearing our family apart with their greed. When I reached home, I turned off the engine but stayed in the car. My house sat quietly under the Arizona sun, but I felt like I was staring at something rotten beneath its walls. Inside, Lily and Brandon were laughing as I walked in. Brandon's feet were propped on my table, and Lily was photographing a plate of food as though preparing for a magazine spread. Neither of them noticed my expression. Neither sensed that the truth in my purse could set this entire household on fire. I walked straight to my workspace and shut the door. I set the USB in the middle of my desk. Sunlight caught the metal surface, making it look like evidence in a crime investigation. I stared at it for a long moment, then leaned back. I'm not letting them take another dollar from me. I spoke aloud, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The sentence wasn't fueled by anger. It was shaped by pain, humiliation, and the realization that being used by the people I loved had hollowed me out for years. I didn't yet know exactly what to do next, but I knew I would never again let anyone, child or not, treat my life as their bank account. I closed my eyes, imagining the road ahead, consulting a lawyer, reviewing all my assets, preparing to confront Jackie, reclaiming my home from Lily and Brandon. But before all that, I needed one thing. I needed to be strong. No more soft Eleanor. No more mother who always yielded. No more woman who let people take advantage. When I opened my eyes, the sun had risen higher, washing my desk in light. I stood, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the cool metal knob. A new chapter of my life was waiting, one I had never planned, never wanted, but now had no choice but to write. And I would write it. For myself. For the truth. For the years of life I refused to give away to lies. I inhaled deeply and whispered to myself, "All right, Eleanor, time to move forward." I stood there for a long time, knowing that turning this doorknob meant my old life would crumble behind me, revealing truths I wasn't ready to face. But then I flipped on the light, stepped inside, and closed the door behind me. My familiar space, the pine scent, the shelves I built myself, the warm glow from my lamp, suddenly felt like a place I no longer belonged, as if I were a guest wandering through my own home. I set my purse down on the table and let myself fall into the chair, trying to breathe steadily to push away the tightness rising in my throat. But before I could gather myself, Brandon's voice boomed from outside, loud enough to shatter the fragile silence I was clinging to. "Eleanor, can you grab me a Coke?" His voice was low, commanding, like he was calling for a servant. I walked into the living room. Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet propped on the table, sneakers covered in dust. He didn't look at me, his eyes glued to the sports program on TV. His posture was no different from someone who owned the house. He acted as though he had long forgotten that he was merely my daughter's unemployed boyfriend, someone I had financially supported for 4 years. I kept my voice even. "Get it yourself, Brandon." He glanced at me, shrugged, and continued watching TV. Such a small gesture, yet it made me realize the last traces of respect had fallen away with time. Before I could return to my room, Lily called from upstairs, her voice sharp and irritated. "Mom, Where's your credit card? I need to book a spa appointment. This afternoon, I stopped. All day I had been trying to hide my pain, trying to stay calm, but Lily's demands for money pierced straight through the most vulnerable part of me. I didn't reply. I went back into my workspace and shut the door, this time harder. I sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out the wedding folder I had kept since Jackie began planning. I once thought it was a cute keepsake. Flower quotes, the photography contract, venue fees. But today, they were no longer memories. They were evidence. I opened the expense sheet. The number appeared clearly, $68,000. All of it from me. Not partially, not shared, all. Back then, I told myself I was doing it for Jackie, hoping she'd have a perfect wedding. Now looking back, I wondered, had Jackie ever thought about lowering costs because of how hard I'd worked all these years? Or had she simply pushed everything to the highest tier to maximize my investment? I flipped to the page about wedding gifts. Jackie once told me, "Mom, everyone prefers cash now. It's so much more convenient. Physical gifts are just clutter." I had agreed without hesitation. But now, remembering that moment, a different layer of truth surfaced. Cash gifts mean easy to split, easy to hide, easy to turn into something else. My breath grew shallow as I recalled those thick envelopes left on the reception table, love offerings from my friends, colleagues, and family, perhaps becoming part of someone's plan. I wrote down the number. Wedding cash gifts, $47,000, most of it from people I had known for years. I wondered, did Daniel know this from the start? Was he the one who suggested cash only? Or was it Jackie? I didn't want to believe that. But the photos Marcy had shown me had ripped open a door of truth that I could no longer shut. I picked up a pen, my hand still trembling, and began writing every detail I remembered. The day Jackie insisted on cash gifts, the times Daniel praised me for being generous, how they talked about their financial future as if already calculated, the occasions Jackie dodged questions about their joint accounts. I didn't know why I was writing all of this, but something instinctive told me I needed to record every piece, as though, if I didn't, the fragments would vanish and I'd never be able to assemble the terrifying picture taking shape. The door creaked open. Lily walked in without knocking. "Mom, I called you and you didn't answer. What's wrong? Are you overthinking things again?" I looked up at her. Lily's expression was not concern. It was irritation that I hadn't answered her demands. She crossed her arms and sighed. "Mom, don't think too much. The older you get, the more paranoid you become. Life isn't that complicated." That sentence, simple, careless, and dismissive, cut deeper than anything else today. I looked at my younger daughter. The same, 34-year-old who once cried into my arms after her first breakup. The same girl who sat behind me during that long summer road trip across Arizona. The same child I held when she felt life was unfair, now standing in front of me, seeing her mother as an obstacle. It felt like something gripped my heart tightly. Not anger, but a sadness so sharp I couldn't breathe. Lily rolled her eyes. "I'm going to the spa. Brandon's hungry. Can you make him something?" She closed the door before I could answer. I sat still, my hand resting on the open page. The lines I had written blurred as my eyes burned. It took me several minutes to realize I was crying, not because of Daniel, not because of Jackie, but because of Lily, because my own daughter saw me as an ATM and a shadow easy to manipulate. I wiped my face, inhaled, and felt something small but powerful shift inside me. Something long buried began to rise. Self-protection. I wrote another line in my notebook. My daughter sees me as a tool. Her boyfriend treats my home as his own. That single line, though written as a note, felt like the first time I had called the truth by its real name. I could not stay silent forever. I could not keep closing my eyes. I could not let the rest of my years be used for purposes I never agreed to. That night, for the first time in years, I locked my bedroom door. Lily knocked a few times, calling my name, but I didn't open it. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, letting silence fill the room. I knew I had crossed an invisible boundary, the boundary between endurance and awakening. I whispered into the darkness, a quiet vow to myself. Enough. Eleanor won't stay silent anymore. And I knew everything would change from here. But I also knew it was what I needed to reclaim what was left of my peace. I thought I might sleep a little that night, after such a long day and discoveries that squeezed my heart until it hurt. But as I changed clothes and reached for the bedroom light switch, I heard Lily's voice coming from the living room. Her tone was bright and overly cheerful, completely different from the indifference she had shown me earlier. I froze, my hand still on the switch. A sharp instinct crawled up my spine. I needed to listen. I cracked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet except for the warm light from the living room glowing onto the ceiling. Lily's voice echoed. She had put the call on speaker, as if the conversation needed no privacy, no consideration for anyone sharing the house. I stood on the stairs, hidden in the dark, heart pounding without knowing why. "Tell me again," Lily laughed, a sugary laugh with something sour underneath. "She's really gonna dump him? In 2 months?" Then Jackie's voice came through. Clear, cold, nothing like the girl who once held my hand running along Santa Monica Beach when she was 10. "Yeah, in 2 months it'll be done. Clean divorce, no. Drama. And we split the wedding gifts 60-40. I get the bigger share because Mom paid for the whole wedding." I gripped the wooden railing so hard that my fingertips went numb. My heart twisted, then dropped as if losing all warmth at once. Lily burst into laughter. Oh my God, she'd faint if she knew, but she won't. Mom's old, so easy to fool. The words old and easy to fool cut through me like a thin, cold blade. I stood frozen, my breath breaking in my chest. Not because Jackie was planning a divorce, not because they were dividing wedding gifts like loot, but because my daughter, the one I raised with everything I had, called me those words without hesitation or compassion. Jackie continued, her voice emotionless, like discussing a bargain item. "Once everything's done, I'll tell Mom I need to move out, start fresh after the heartbreak. She'll feel sorry for me and pay the down payment automatically. She always does." Lily chimed in immediately. "I'm doing the same thing with Mom. She's used to it. Yesterday I told her my car broke down and she's already thinking of buying me a new one. I just need to ask a few more times so she gets used to spending." I nearly lost my grip on the railing. I, who had raised both girls with money earned from sweat in our woodworking shop, had turned into a wallet they could manipulate and practice tactics on. Lily's voice rang out again. "Brandon says she's predictable. Say something sweet and she believes it. I mentioned wanting to go to the spa and she didn't even dare say no. That's what happens when you're old." My legs shook so hard I had to lean into the wall to stay upright. Not from insult, from clarity. Clarity that the people I loved had been treating my affection as something cheap. I steadied my breath, trying not to let a sob escape. Lily would hear it. She would know. Jackie spoke again. "Just make her think Daniel and I are genuinely happy. When the divorce happens, I'll play the betrayed wife. She'll blame him and open her wallet. The house deposit will take care of itself. Lily asked, curious. What about Mom's trust? I heard old people change wills all the time. Jackie answered casually, who knows? But let's take advantage while she's still soft. Old people are all emotional. I heard chairs moving and more laughter, bright, carefree laughter, as if they were enjoying a late-night comedy, unaware that every word was slicing my heart open. I backed away from the stairs step by step, like a ghost drifting through its own home. The house felt suffocating, the walls closing in. I retreated to my room and locked the door with trembling hands. Under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the uneven beats. Every emotional defense I had collapsed within minutes. What I heard wasn't just betrayal, it was a coordinated plan, calculated by the daughters I had poured the best years of my life into loving and protecting. I sat at the edge of my bed, not crying, not screaming. The pain was so deep that the tears felt trapped in my throat. I only felt cold, a coldness that seeped to the bone. I thought of Jackie as a child, her tiny hand gripping my shirt when she feared thunderstorms. I thought of Lily running into my arms, sobbing after her first fall. Those memories clashed violently with the present, two worlds that no longer touched. The maternal love inside me, always gentle, patient, forgiving, fractured like glass, struck with a hammer. I whispered to the empty room, my voice barely audible. How could you? But the question floated in the air, unanswered. I walked to my desk and looked at the open notebook with the list of suspicions I had started hours earlier. I added a new line, writing slowly, each stroke carving into my heart. They are not only using me, they are performing behind my back. Then a clear thought rose in my mind, bright as a lamp turning on in the dark. I cannot let this continue for even one more day. Facing two manipulative daughters and a deceitful man like Daniel would not be easy. But the truth I heard tonight had transformed my pain into resolve. If I didn't act now, if I kept softening, kept believing sweet, empty words, I would lose everything, including myself. I closed the notebook, breathed deeply to steady myself. And in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. Tomorrow, I would see a lawyer. I would no longer allow myself to be led around. I would no longer let the people I once loved control every breath of my remaining years. I turned off the light. The room fell into darkness, but in my heart, for the first time in a long while, a faint glow, small but unmistakable, began to rise. Not hope, strength. A strength I never thought I still had after 68. And so, in the quiet of the night, I took my first step out of the hurt and onto the path where I would reclaim my life. I arrived at Attorney Harold McIntyre's office the next morning, a mix of tension and determination churning inside me. The late June Scottsdale sun burned fiercely, its light shimmering against the pavement. I sat in my car for a moment, my hand resting on the steering wheel, feeling as if I were about to step into a confrontation I had never imagined facing. All my life, I had been the mediator, the peacemaker, the one who soothed family conflicts. But today, for the first time, I was here to declare something. I would protect myself. Harold's office was inside a quiet, elegant 3-story glass building. The sign reading Harold McIntyre, Family and Estate Law was mounted near the entrance, gold lettering on walnut. Inside, the soft scent of pine and fresh paper greeted me, reminding me of my late husband's workshop, where he once spent hours at the lathe. The memory nearly made me wobble. Harold stood as soon as his assistant led me into the IE conference room. He looked to be in his early 50s, Salt and pepper hair, formal demeanor, but calm, respectful eyes. The kind that made people trust him without being told to. "Mrs. Whitford," he said, extending a hand, his deep voice steady. "Please have a seat. My assistant said you have an urgent matter?" I took a deep breath, set my bag on the glass table, then pulled out the USB Marcy had given me, along with the notebook filled with numbers, dates, and the conversations I'd heard the night before. "I need you to look at these," I said, hearing my own voice tremble slightly. I think my daughters are deceiving me, and my son-in-law too." Harold tilted his head, not surprised, simply turning on his computer and inserting the USB. When the photos appeared, Daniel holding the red-haired woman tightly, his hand tangled in her hair, he frowned and took precise notes. "Does this photo have metadata?" he asked. "Yes, the photographer verified everything for me." "Good, very good." What struck me was that he didn't react with shock or pity. He received everything with a cool professionalism, but not indifference. A part of me felt steadier. Clearly, this was not beyond his ability to handle. "And this," I said, opening the notebook to the page where I had written down the conversation between Lily and Jackie, my voice gradually more even, more solid, is what I heard last night. Harold read without interrupting. He simply nodded a few times, as if each line was fitting into a picture he'd already partly predicted. When I finished, he set the USB on the table and said, "Mrs. Eleanor, I want you to understand something clearly. This is no longer a normal family issue. This is deliberate financial exploitation." I leaned back. Hearing it spoken aloud by someone else made it real. It was no longer a passing nightmare. It was truth I couldn't deny. "Now," Harold continued, "I need you to provide everything you have. The photos, notes, wedding expense sheets, messages, anything at all." I handed everything to him. They spread across the large table, the evidence of 3 heartbreaking months I had endured in silence. Harold arranged them into sections, then looked straight at me. "First, let's talk about Lily and her boyfriend. How long have they lived in your home?" 4 years, I answered. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "And is there a lease agreement?" "No, just let them stay. I thought Lily needed support after her divorce." Harold nodded, then said something that made me sit upright. "In that case, under Arizona law, you can require them to leave within 30 days. No disputes, no lawsuits. They have no legal right to stay in your house." It felt like the floor lifted beneath me, carrying me toward a light I hadn't seen in months. Truly? I can do that? Completely legal. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from receiving back a power I thought I had lost. Harold went on. "As for your assets, I recommend establishing an irrevocable trust." I knew what a trust was, but not the details, so he explained, step by step. "A will can be contested," he said calmly. "Children can claim you were influenced, pressured, or not mentally sound." I flinched. Jackie had once remarked that older people change their wills often. Clearly, they had considered that angle. "But a trust," he said, resting his hand on the documents, "cannot be reclaimed, cannot be altered by anyone else, and most importantly, cannot be contested. Once assets are placed into a trust, they are nearly fully protected. You can still use them, still live in your home, still manage your money, but after you pass, no one can fight over or seize anything." I sat, stunned. A rare wave of relief washed through my chest. "So, they won't be able to take anything unless I want them to?" Harold smiled, softly but with certainty. Exactly. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in this battle. I want to establish the trust, I said immediately, as soon as possible. I don't want them touching anything ever again. Harold made notes quickly, then looked up. But you must understand, this will make them furious. I met his eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. They stopped being family, I said, my voice firm enough to surprise even me, when they started treating me like a wallet. The air in the conference room went still. Harold nodded, not politely, but in acknowledgement of a strength he recognized. Then let's begin, he said. I signed the legal agreement. The sound of the pen sliding across paper felt like a blade cutting through the invisible rope that had bound me for years. Clean, final, freeing. When I stepped outside the office, the sun was still harsh, but it no longer blinded me. The hot wind blew against my face, but I felt lighter, as if I had just walked out of a dark room where I had been trapped for far too long. Standing beside my car, watching the glass buildings reflect the blinding sky, I thought, Eleanor Whitford has entered a new chapter. I am no longer the woman tossed around by circumstances. From today forward, I hold the wheel. Then I opened my car door, started the engine, and felt certainty settle into my bones. My counterattack, the counterattack of a mother long underestimated, had officially begun. I returned home late in the afternoon, carrying 2 thick yellow envelopes Harold had prepared. He emphasized that these were the first step in the legal process, and that how I handed them over mattered less than my resolve, my refusal to yield to tears or rage from people who had thrived on my vulnerability. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hand on the steering wheel staring at the familiar house that suddenly felt foreign, as if it had witnessed far more than I was ready to accept. It had once held laughter, warm dinners, family photos tacked to the walls. Now it felt like a silent battlefield. I inhaled deeply, stepped out of the car, and walked up the stone path to the porch. The envelopes in my hand felt heavy as rocks, but also like shields protecting the rest of my life. Inside, as expected, Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet on the table as if it belonged to him. The TV blared a football game and a sweating beer can sat beside him. Lily lounged on the staircase, scrolling her phone, looking far too comfortable for someone living off another person for 4 years. I stood before them, didn't speak at first, and placed the 2 envelopes on the glass table. The soft slap they made was sharp as a blade. Brandon raised a brow, rude as ever. "What's this?" "Eviction notices," I said, my voice calm. So calm it startled even me. "You 2 have 30 days to leave my house." In that instant, the room froze. Brandon shot up from the sofa, face flushing red, veins rising in his neck. "Are you senile, old woman? This is Lily's family home. We've lived here 4 years. You can't just throw us out like dogs." Every word he spat hit the air, but none of it touched me. I'd heard worse. I'd endured more than enough disrespect to become immune. Lily burst into tears instantly, her sobs flowing with the precision of a rehearsed act. "Mom, how could you do this to me? You know I'm struggling. You know I'm just trying to get back on my feet after the divorce. Mom, you're so cruel." I looked at my daughter, the same one who had feverishly clung to me at 7 years old, the same girl with wide, innocent eyes who used to curl against me when the world felt unfair. Now she cried for money, not love. "Lily," I said slowly, "I heard everything last night. I know what you and Jackie are planning. I know you see me as a wallet, so you don't get to say I've betrayed anyone." Lily froze mid-sob, as if slapped. Brandon shot her a sharp look. Then, reflexively, Lily grabbed her phone and dialed. Jackie, listen. Mom's kicking us out. Something's wrong with her. She gave us these papers. It's like she wants us homeless." I stood with my arms crossed, hearing every word Jackie spoke on speaker. On the other end, Jackie's voice came through, angry but not surprised. "What? I'll be there. Don't say anything else. Let me and Daniel handle it." I pressed my lips together. Handle it. As if I were a malfunctioning appliance, not their mother. Brandon turned toward me, voice raised in threat. "You can't do this. We have rights. I swear. We'll sue. You'll regret this for the rest of your life." I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't shed a tear. I simply repeated the line I had practiced ever since I left Harold's office. "You two have 30 days, no more." The room vibrated with their outrage. Lily sobbed harder. Brandon kicked the table leg, knocking over a vase, water spilling onto the rug. I turned away and walked back to my workspace, locking the door, just as Harold advised. I heard Lily's sniffles, Brandon's curses, their frantic whispering. None of it hurt anymore. It only confirmed my decision was right. I opened my notebook and documented each behavior, each word, each reaction. Every detail mattered if they tried anything. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, but not from fear, from the realization that I had stepped into a new version of myself, a woman who protected herself, a woman who no longer mistook silence for kindness, a woman who had endured enough to learn that gentleness is not weakness. When I finished the page, I looked up at the glass panel in my workspace. My reflection stared back, older, tired, but with eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. I was in control. The feeling was so powerful I placed a hand over my chest to steady myself. And what Lily and Jackie didn't know, the truth I had no reason to tell them, was the most important thing of all. Every asset I owned, this house, the woodworking shop, savings, investments, everything had already been transferred into the trust. No one, not a single person, could touch it. Not my daughters, not my son-in-law, not the freeloader in my living room. I closed the notebook and leaned back, filled with a strange calm. The battle had begun, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one pushed into the corner. I was the one stepping forward. I was the one holding the light. I was the one deciding. And silently, I made a promise no one else could hear. Eleanor Whitford will not let anyone take her life from her ever again. I knew from the moment I heard Jackie's car pull into the driveway that the evening wouldn't be just another family dinner. Not after everything that had happened, not after I handed the eviction notices to Lily and Brandon, and certainly not after the whispered schemes Jackie murmured on the phone, words that still felt carved into the walls of my mind. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce, the steam rising and fogging my glasses. I tried to keep everything steady, tried to ensure my hands didn't tremble, even though I knew tonight wasn't about the roasted chicken I was preparing. It was about the final confrontation between me and the daughters I once believed would never betray me. The door opened. Jackie stepped in first, polished as always, hair tied neatly, a stylish plaid jacket, a smile practiced to perfection, but I could see the urgency beneath her makeup. "Mom," Jackie said, as if a peaceful evening awaited us, "I brought fresh bread. We can have it with your dinner." Daniel followed her. His eyes slid past me quickly, then lingered on the living room, where Lily and Brandon sat with tense, hopeful faces, like drowning people clinging to one last life raft. It was clear. They had called Jackie obsessively, enough for her to bring Daniel along as some kind of rescue squad. I didn't hurry to speak. I set the pot down, turned off the stove, wiped my hands, and walked to the dining table I had prepared ahead of time. Everything was tidy and formal, like one final ritual before the truth shattered open. "Let's eat," I said softly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear in the silent house. Dinner began with small talk, Jackie asking about my health, Daniel asking about the woodworking shop, Lily pretending to choke up every time I looked her way, but only a few minutes later, their real purpose began to show. "Mom," Jackie said, setting her glass down, looking at me with an expression carefully crafted to appear thoughtful, "I think it's time you considered selling the house. You're living alone in a place this big. It's not suitable anymore." Daniel nodded as if he were some expert on my life. "Besides," he added, "if you sell now, you'll get a great price. You could move into a more comfortable apartment. We'll help you choose." The words came out like a caring suggestion, but they were sharp as a blade. I stayed silent, watching them. I didn't nod or shake my head. I just looked. That silence made both Jackie and Daniel waver slightly, and they kept pushing. "And if you sell," Jackie continued, her voice smooth as if she'd rehearsed it all afternoon, "you could help us with the down payment on a new house, so our family can stay close." I almost laughed. Before I could respond, Daniel leaned toward me, adding smoothly, "Either way. Later on, all your assets will go to the kids anyway. Why hold on to so much and stress yourself out?" Stress myself out? What did he just say? I heard Lily softly murmur agreement, and Brandon smirked like this was all obvious. And then all the hurt, the collapse, the months of quiet suffering aligned into one straight, steady line running through me. I set my fork down. "All right," I said. "If you all want to talk seriously, then I have something serious to show you." I stood, walked to my office, and returned with the USB Marcy had given me, the one weapon I knew would tear every mask off the faces sitting around my table. I placed the USB in front of Jackie. "Open it." Jackie looked at me, confused. Then she plugged it into her laptop and opened the photo folder. The room died instantly. The first picture, Daniel holding the red-haired woman, their lips almost touching, his hand behind her neck. The second, another angle even clearer, undeniable. The third, the woman's hand wearing a wedding ring. Jackie froze. Her face turned to stone, her lips trembling before going rigid. Daniel went pale, blinking rapidly as if the images might disappear if he denied them long enough. Lily covered her mouth. Brandon swore under his breath, unsure whether to look at me or at Daniel. I folded my arms, my voice calm to the point of cruelty. "This is what happened 2 hours before the wedding. Full metadata, exact timestamp, GPS coordinates, real people, real events." Jackie inhaled sharply, choking on air. "No, no way. Daniel, I say something." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again, his face twisting like someone gripping his throat. I straightened up and looked at each of them. "We're not done," I said. "Let me read the sentence you two said to each other last night." Lily shot to her feet, shouting, "Mom, were you eavesdropping?" "No," I replied. "I heard you. You had the speaker on." And I read, word for word. 2 more months and it's done. Smooth divorce. Wedding gifts split 60-40. Mom's old. Easy to fool. No one breathed. No one blinked. Jackie stood so fast her chair crashed backward. "Lily, you actually said that where Mom could hear you?" Lily stammered. I didn't know Mom. Brandon cursed again, louder this time. I looked at them. 4 people. 4 faces exposing guilt and fear. A family I once thought I had, now reduced to a swamp where each one had tried to drag me under. I placed my hand on the table and said the line I had prepared exactly for this moment. I know you all see me as a wallet, but today, I'm informing you of one thing. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. All of my assets, my house, my money, my shop, have been moved into a trust, and a trust cannot be sued, cannot be touched, cannot be broken. No one moved. I continued. Later on, by law, each of you will receive the minimum share, not 1 cent more. Jackie nearly collapsed back into her chair. Daniel gripped the edge of the table, white as a sheet. Lily began to cry. Brandon muttered curses, but his voice was shaking. I stood up. Dinner is over. I left behind a table full of cold food and 4 people watching their world collapse in an instant, like walls losing their foundation. I walked into the hallway, feeling as though I had stepped out of a room filled with toxic smoke. Behind me, I heard Jackie sobbing, Daniel mumbling something like an apology, Lily crying out in a mix of desperation and rage. But none of it touched me anymore. In that moment, I understood perfectly. My family didn't fall apart tonight. It fell apart long ago. Tonight. They simply saw what was left of it, clear and bare, like the truth I had laid on the table. The days after that fateful dinner, my house felt like a dying animal thrashing in chaos before it finally surrendered. Every wall, every door seemed to witness something I never imagined facing at 68. Psychological games from the very children I spent my life loving. Lily and Brandon behaved like people with nothing left to lose, or who believed that if they pushed hard enough, I would break the way I always had. But they miscalculated. I was no longer the mother who could be manipulated by tears. I'm struggling, or empty promises of a future they never intended to honor. In the first 3 days, their strategy was clear. Noise, disruption, attempts to rattle me. In the morning when I came downstairs, Lily was blasting loud electronic music, making the dishes on the rack tremble. She'd never listened to that genre before, let alone blasted it inside a house with an elderly person. I brewed my coffee as if I heard nothing. Lily glanced at me, challenging. "Doesn't this bother you?" I simply replied, "No." Brandon slammed the door every time he went out, trying to shake the walls. Sometimes he left empty beer cans on the dining table and nudged them to fall, watching me like he was waiting for me to snap, but I said nothing. At night, they tried a different tactic. Lily tried frightening me, flicking hallway lights on and off when I walked through, cracking my door open, then closing it, or sitting in the dark living room whispering things like, "Being alone at your age. Dangerous things can happen." I knew the game. Harold warned me. When exploiters lose control, they will do anything to regain it. Still, I stayed silent. One night, near midnight, Lily stood outside my office door, voice trembling as if she were truly heartbroken. "Mom, I'm sorry, I really am. I don't know what Jackie told you, but I was wrong. Brandon, he controls me. I don't want this." I remained at my desk, pen moving across the page just as Harold instructed. I let her finish, then opened the door. She was crying. Real tears or a perfect imitation. But I'd been Lily's mother her whole life. I knew her inside and out. "What do you want?" I asked. Lily blinked, hesitated only a second. If you give me more time or help with the deposit on a new place, I promise." That was when I cut her off, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. "If you were truly sorry, you would apologize without asking for anything." Lily froze for 2 seconds. Then her face changed entirely, the mask falling like shattered glass. "Fine," she yelled. "Then stay here alone. Brandon's right, you're selfish. Don't blame anyone later." She stormed upstairs, each step pounding with rage. I returned to my desk and wrote, Day 4. Lily shifted from remorse, request money, anger. Failed. Brandon was different. He didn't plead, he threatened. One afternoon, he stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed, blocking my path. You know what people will say, right? He growled. They'll say you kicked your own daughter out. You think you'll live peacefully after that? I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He mirrored me. I stepped the other way. He blocked again. I met his eyes, my voice firm. Whether I live peacefully or not is none of your concern. He clenched his jaw, but this time he backed away. Every detail I recorded. Harold said it was vital if they tried to flip the story, claim I was unstable or abusive. I never imagined my daughter and the man she dragged into my home would stoop so low, but that was before I learned the truth. The low point of their desperation came when Jackie sent a text first. Mom, I'm bringing someone to help you. You're not well. You need an evaluation. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s stood outside, wearing a psychologist's badge, with Jackie beside her. Her face a mix of concern and superiority, like someone preparing to intervene in another person's life, while believing it's for their own good. Hi, Mom, Jackie said gently, as if she hadn't been exposed with infidelity the night before. This is Dr. Monroe. I think you're under a lot of stress and need... I cut her off. No. Dr. Monroe smiled professionally. Mrs. Whitford, we only want to determine whether... I did not invite you into my home, I said, staring directly at her. Please leave. Jackie flushed. You're not acting rational. We just want to make sure you're capable. I opened the door wider, my voice icy. If you are not off my porch in 3 seconds, I will call the police and report trespassing. Both women froze. Then Dr. Monroe stepped back. Jackie stiffened, saying nothing. I closed the door, not harshly but decisively. In the silence of the house, I heard Lily whisper from the stairs. What happened? She kicked you out. Jackie hissed back. Fine, let her destroy herself. Just watch. They left. And for the first time in months, hearing my daughter's voice didn't frighten me. It didn't hurt. It just felt empty, followed by a strange, unexpected sense of relief. In the days that followed, things in the house began breaking in suspicious ways. A picture frame fell. A doorknob was twisted out of alignment. A ceramic vase I had bought 20 years ago was smashed. But instead of getting angry, I picked up my phone, photographed each item, and saved everything into the folder labeled Legal Documents Section B. Every time I pressed the shutter, I felt a little stronger, because I was no longer fighting with emotion. I was fighting with clarity. On the 10th day of the eviction notice, Lily and Brandon finally began packing boxes. Their arguments echoed through the house. Blame, frustration, fear. Lily cried, then screamed. Brandon cursed and pounded on the walls, the thuds shaking the plaster but never breaking the calm I was building for myself inside my office. I closed the door, sat at my desk, turned on the warm lamp, and opened my notebook. New lines flowed steadily across the page. 10th day. They know I've changed. No more negotiating, no more hesitation, no room left for pity that can be exploited. I set my pen down and leaned back. For the first time in many years, I felt serene. Strangely, that serenity came from the deepest place of pain, yet it was also where strength was born. I had exhausted myself by loving the wrong way. Now I was learning to love the right person, myself, and my family, the ones who thought I would endure forever, finally understood. Eleanor Whitford would not be silent anymore. and if I ever chose silence again, it would be a weapon, not a weakness. The 30th day arrived as softly as a breath, yet as heavy as a stone on my chest, not because I was afraid or unsure, but because it was the day I would watch a rotten chapter of my life finally close. I woke at 6 a.m. to the Arizona sunlight slipping through the blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the wooden floor. Today, the house would change. Today, I would change. I made my coffee and set the cup on the table in silence. There were no pounding footsteps on the stairs, no fights erupting in the living room, no beer cans rolling across the floor. It felt like the quiet before a storm, except I no longer feared storms. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Harold standing there, immaculate as always, holding a stack of documents. Beside him were 2 Scottsdale police officers, a man around 40 and a woman whose stern eyes softened when she met mine. "Mrs. Whitford," Harold said, "I'll be with you through the entire process. Everything is within the law. No one will give you trouble again." I nodded. In that moment, I felt like 2 solid walls had risen behind me. We stepped inside. Lily and Brandon had no idea the police were coming. Lily was sprawled on the sofa, hair messy, phone in hand. Brandon was still asleep, crumpled in a blanket like a lazy child. When they saw the officers, Lily shot upright as if doused with cold water. "What is this?" she screamed. Brandon jerked awake, eyes wide, panic flashing into anger in a heartbeat. "What the hell is going on?" The lead officer spoke in a firm but professional tone. "Today is day 30 since the eviction notice was delivered. You both have 2 hours to pack your belongings and leave this property." The room exploded instantly. Lily shrieked, "No, no, no! Mom, you can't do this to me! This is my home! I've lived here for 4 years!" The officer repeated calmly, "There is no rental agreement. This is the homeowner's legal right," and Mrs. Whitford followed every required step. Brandon lunged toward me, pointing a finger in my face. "You're insane! You'll regret this! You think this is right?" Harold stepped forward like a quiet shield. "If you continue threatening her, we are authorized to restrain you." Brandon backed up, still cursing, kicking the wall hard enough to knock plaster loose. Lily collapsed on the couch, sobbing, "Mom, please, I'm not ready. I have nowhere to go." I stood there looking at my daughter, the same child who once held my hand when she feared the dark, the same child who slept on my chest as a baby. But I didn't see that little girl anymore. I saw a woman who had learned to survive through manipulation, draining the mother who gave her everything. "Why are you doing this?" Lily wailed. "Why are you throwing your daughter out?" I inhaled slowly. My heart didn't hurt the way it used to. Now there was only clarity. "Because you threw me out of your heart first," I said, "and I cannot live with people who see me as a wallet." Lily broke into harder sobs, but I didn't move. The officers started the timer. 2 hours. 2 short hours that felt like a lifetime to Lily and Brandon. They ran upstairs, dragging suitcases down, clothes spilling everywhere, shouting at each other. Lily accusing me of cruelty, Brandon pounding on furniture, Lily screaming that I was heartless and ungrateful and not a real mother. I stood in the kitchen, holding my coffee, looking out into the backyard, the same yard where Jackie used to play ball, where my old dog slept in the shade, where I'd once planted flowers with my husband. Now it bore witness to a painful but necessary cleansing. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. Relieved like someone taking off a heavy, suffocating armor they had been forced to wear for 4 years. 2 hours passed. Lily and Brandon came down the stairs with the last of their boxes. Lily's eyes were swollen, mascara streaked across her cheeks. Brandon was trembling with anger. They walked out to the porch and loaded their belongings into Brandon's old brown car. He slammed the trunk hard enough to shake the frame. Lily turned back, hatred and hurt mixing in her eyes. "You're going to live alone for the rest of your life," she said, her voice cracked and venomous. I stood tall. No tears, no trembling. "Better alone," I replied, "than surrounded by people who only use me." Lily yanked the car door open. Brandon started the engine. The old vehicle rumbled out of the driveway and disappeared behind the trees. The officers thanked me and left. Harold shook my hand, firm, steady. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. I'm proud of you." When the door closed, a silence unlike anything I'd heard in years washed over the house. A silence. So deep I could hear my own breath. A silence. So complete the ticking clock sounded alive. A silence. That finally let me realize this was the first time in 4 years I had the right to peace. I walked to the living room chair, the one I never dared sit in because Brandon claimed it as his spot, and sat down. My face felt cold. My back ached. Then, the tears came. Not because I had lost my children, not because I was hurt, not because I was lonely, but because after 4 years, after dozens of sleepless nights, after having my heart squeezed by betrayal over and over, I finally felt myself return. I had found my way back to who I was. I had chosen myself, and it was the best choice I had ever made. One quiet morning, as I was brewing chamomile tea to start my day, the phone rang. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, painting soft stripes across the walnut countertop I loved so much. Everything felt peaceful, so when the phone buzzed, I sensed the stillness was about to be disturbed. The caller ID read, Jackie. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Not out of fear, because I had broken the habit of rushing in to comfort her every time she was upset. I wanted to respond with the calm I had fought so hard to earn. "When will you stop destroying my family?" Jackie said. No greeting, no breath, just an attack as if I were the cause of every misery in her life. I sat down, hands wrapped around the warm cup. My voice was soft, steady. "Jackie, I'm not destroying your family. I'm simply refusing to let it destroy me." Silence. A few seconds long. I could practically hear Jackie's angry breathing, as if my words wounded her more than anything else could. Then her voice cracked, furious, desperate. "If you hadn't interfered, if you hadn't blown up everything with Daniel, none of this would have happened." I closed my eyes, recalling the photos Marcy had given me, the messages Lily overheard, the months of Jackie letting me pay for everything, every bill, every debt, every mistake. "No, Jackie," I said. "Your marriage fell apart because you and Daniel were using each other for money, not because of me. I wasn't the one cheating 2 hours before the wedding, and I wasn't the one calling me own mother easy to fool." She fell silent again. So long I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice returned, brittle as dry leaves. "You'll regret this, I swear." I simply answered, "I've regretted enough for the past 30 years, Jackie. Now it's time I choose for myself." I was the one who hung up, something I had never done before. A few days later, I was watering the lavender along the back porch when my phone pinged with a message. I wiped my hands and checked it. "Daniel Foster, if you stay quiet about the photos, I'll send you $10,000. I want this resolved fast." I stared at the text, not angry, not shocked, just amused. He thought my dignity, My self-respect, the betrayal of my daughter, his brazen infidelity right before the ceremony were worth $10,000? I pressed block without replying a single word. The phone went still again, as if it too felt relieved to cut off something toxic. Word about the divorce spread faster than I expected. Not because I talked. I hadn't said a single thing to anyone. But people who live by deceit rarely keep secrets well, especially when their lives start breaking apart piece by piece. According to what Harold heard from a colleague who handled divorce cases, Jackie and Daniel's battle resembled a wildfire, furious, chaotic, consuming everything they had tried to build on lies. Jackie accused Daniel of infidelity. Daniel accused Jackie of hiding wedding money. They dragged each other between court and lawyers' offices like two drunk strangers fighting in the street. The wedding gifts, $47,000 from people who trusted them, evaporated like steam. It all turned into legal fees, court costs, investigative expenses, and other pointless attempts to prove the other one was worse. In the end, they were left with nothing but resentment and two empty skies. And I watched from afar, not bitter, not pleased, simply detached, as though I were watching a play that once threatened to drown me, but now I had stepped off the stage entirely. One evening, I sat on the porch with a light shawl over my shoulders, watching the sunset burn the sky orange. I turned on the warm lights along the stone path, lavender scent drifting in the breeze. For the first time in ages, I truly felt alive. Not surviving, but living. I placed my hand over my chest, where my heart still beat steadily, strongly. I no longer felt heavy when thinking of Jackie. I no longer hurt when thinking of Lily. I no longer blamed myself for giving too much. I felt only one simple truth. Freedom is worth more than anything. More than expectations, more than the weight of motherhood, more than the fear of loneliness they used to control me. Freedom is knowing I don't owe my life to anyone. Freedom is standing up and walking out of the dark without waiting for someone to pull me. Freedom is choosing peace, choosing myself, choosing a path free of those who see me as property. And as the sky turned purple, I smiled. A real smile, one that made my eyes sting just a little. I had lost much, but I had found the most precious thing again, myself. Eleanor Whitford, a woman who finally understood that sacrifice is not destiny. It is a choice, and starting today, I choose freedom. 3 weeks passed after Lily and Brandon left the house, and what surprised me most wasn't their absence, but the absence of the noise they carried with them. The house was so spacious I could hear the wind slipping through the door frame, the wood expanding and contracting with the change in temperature, and even the echo of my own footsteps across the clean wooden floor. For 4 years, I hadn't realized how beautiful those sounds were, gentle, honest, and untouched by resentment, demands, or disrespect. I lived alone, and for the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely. The first morning after they left, I woke at 7 a.m., went down to the kitchen, and stood there for quite a while. The coffee machine Brandon had dropped countless times stood intact on the counter, gleaming under the sunlight. I placed a coffee pot in, pressed the button, and listened to the steady hum of the machine, without fearing someone would yank the plug or shout about needing the stove or complain about anything except maybe that the coffee would brew, a little stronger than I liked. That small piece made me laugh, a real laugh, soft as smoke, one that felt like it had been asleep inside me for years. On the 3rd day, I took out the paintbrush set my husband had given me in 1985, a gift I had never truly used. Back then, life was too busy. Then came the children, then the store, then his illness, and I pushed my own interests aside as if they were luxuries I didn't deserve. I sat at the dining table, spread out the paper, set the palette. Sunlight passed through the window and shimmered across the watercolors like pieces of glass. For the first time in 4 decades, I dipped a brush into blue and touched it to paper. The first stroke trembled, the second steadied, the third, my mind finally let go. I painted the backyard, the lemon tree my husband planted when Jackie was born, the wooden chair where I used to read to Lily. Everything appeared imperfect, proportionally wrong, yet painfully true. When I finished, I didn't cry. I simply placed my hand over my heart and felt a gentle easing ripple outward like circles on water. I had returned to myself, the woman I was before I drowned under duty and endless sacrifice. A week later, I joined a woodworking repair class for older adults at the community center. I had always thought I only knew how to run a store, that working with tools was men's work. But standing before a piece of wood, holding a chisel, hearing fibers split under my hands, it made me feel stronger than I ever had. In the class was Margaret, 82, a cheerful widow who loved telling stories about her late husband. Philip, a veteran with slightly trembling hands but unwavering patience. And Laura, 50, newly divorced and learning how to begin again. I sat among them holding a light mallet and realized I wasn't lost. I wasn't left behind. I belonged here. None of them knew my story, and I didn't need to tell it. We shared through laughter, through borrowing sandpaper, through lifting each other up when a piece of wood broke the wrong way. That evening, I returned home with the scent of fresh lumber on my hands and a heart full of energy. In the second week, I decided to renovate the kitchen, a task I should have done long ago but kept postponing out of fear of inconveniencing the freeloaders living under my roof. I bought new wall cabinets, a power screwdriver, a measuring tape, and a roll of vinyl covering. The store clerk was shocked I intended to do it myself. It took me 2 days to remove the old cabinets, sand the surfaces, measure carefully, and install each unit. At times, I was so tired I had to sit on the floor, but the feeling of rebuilding my own home kept lifting me back to my feet. When I mounted the final cabinet, I leaned against the counter, sweat sliding down my temple, and thought, "Eleanor, you were never old. You were just held down by people who dragged you under." In that moment, I felt young again, not in age, but in spirit. That weekend, Harold emailed, "Your trust is complete. Your assets are fully protected. No one can alter or dispute anything." I read those lines 3 times. Each time felt like placing another solid stone beneath the foundation of my new life. I no longer had to fear Jackie suing. I no longer had to fear Lily demanding a share of the house. I no longer had to fear Daniel returning with lies. I no longer had to fear losing everything I had spent my life building. I sat quietly, then burst into a long, clear laugh, the kind I couldn't remember producing in years. That afternoon, while I was sorting my paintbrushes, the phone rang. Marcy Donalds, the photographer who helped me see the truth. I answered. Her voice was warm, slightly hesitant. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about you these past weeks, wondering if you're all right. You said you'd check in. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I looked at the half-finished painting on my table, blue sky strokes and soft lavender. I smiled. "I'm all right, Marcy. Actually, I'm better than ever." She exhaled in relief. "I'm so glad to hear that." I picked up my car keys. "Marcy," I said, my voice carrying a sincerity even I could recognize as new. "I owe you a thank you. You helped me escape a life that was going in the wrong direction. Are you free for coffee? My treat." On the other end, she laughed, simple and warm as late afternoon sunlight. I'd love that. I hung up. I looked around my house, for the first time completely mine. I looked at my life, for the first time completely my own. I grabbed my purse, stepped outside, and took a deep, full breath. Freedom isn't just the absence of chains. Freedom is when your heart feels light enough to lift. And I, Eleanor Whitford, was beginning to lift. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the thin scarf around my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I saw no fear or exhaustion in my eyes. Instead, I saw clarity, ease, and something I thought I had lost: respect for myself. 3 months earlier, I had been a mother used, cornered, treated like a walking wallet. I endured, bent myself in half, convinced that was what a mother must do, that love meant unconditional sacrifice. But betrayal and cruelty from the very people I raised taught me a lesson I should have learned long ago. Love does not include allowing others to destroy you. Sacrifice is not a mother's destiny. Boundaries are part of love, not the opposite of it. When I drew my first boundary, I thought I would collapse. Instead, it held me up. I went from a woman trembling when her daughter mocked her, old and easy to fool, to the woman who stood tall at her doorway and said clearly, "You have 30 days to leave." I went from someone heartbroken by her son-in-law cheating on the wedding day to someone who placed a USB on the table and revealed the truth without a hint of hesitation. I went from someone who believed life after 60 was nothing but waiting to someone rewriting her life at 68 with new colors, new joy, and new self-respect. Looking back, I realized something important. I was never alone. There was Marcy, the woman who stayed up late to send me the photos that changed my life. There was Harold, the calm, persistent attorney who handed me the legal shield that protected my future. There were neighbors who left bread on my porch or asked if I needed help fixing a faucet. There were strangers who smiled when they saw me carrying a basket of flowers, as if they sensed the lighter steps beneath my feet. I once thought I was left with an empty house, but really, I had a small world full of quiet kindness, one I had been too drained to notice before. I slipped my purse over my shoulder. Inside were only my wallet, my phone, and the small notebook where I recorded my healing. I locked the door, stepped onto the porch, and when I opened the garage, the Scottsdale sunlight poured in, bright and pure. After many years, I was about to walk into my first coffee outing, not a tense family meeting, not a stressful appointment with a lawyer, but a simple, sincere invitation. A meeting to say thank you, a meeting to open the door to a new chapter. I looked up at the sky, wide and blue. White clouds drifted gently like clean pages, and the breeze carried the scent of desert dust and the lavender blooming at my doorstep. I smiled, a real smile rising from the deepest part of me. I whispered, "The rest of my life is mine, and no one else's." And I believed it with everything inside me. After more than 40 years of being a mother, a wife, a woman carrying the world for everyone else, I had forgotten something simple. I also deserved a life of my own. Today, at 68, I stepped into the sunlight with weightless feet, as if I had just been freed after years imprisoned by expectations and unspoken obligations. The Scottsdale sky was so blue it felt like I was staring at an unwritten map, not one to follow, but one I would draw myself. I closed the garage door, held the car keys, but paused for a few seconds just to breathe, not to gather courage, but to savor the rare feeling of full autonomy, A new chapter begins not with thunder or shouting or the crash of broken things, but with the soft sound of my own footsteps on the concrete, leading me to the place I should have reached long ago. I opened the car door. I stepped in. I smiled. A new life, unburdened, unblamed, free from the shadows of exploitation, was unfolding right before me, and I knew I was ready. Thank you for staying with me all the way to these final lines of my journey. If you're listening to my story, perhaps somewhere in your own life you've had a crossroads too, a moment when you had to stand up and protect yourself even while your heart was still bleeding. At any age, we all deserve peace, respect, and a life that belongs to us. I would love to know, where are you watching this from? Did any part of my journey remind you of your own or make you reflect on something in your past? Feel free to share in the comments. Your story might become the strength someone else needs to rise again. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, awakening boundaries, and rediscovering yourself after years of sacrifice, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next stories. I'm truly grateful to have you here, because sometimes just one more person listening can make someone's whole world feel warmer.